Chapter 7 Spring of the Tasmanian Tiger. Errol and I presented our master's dissertations in front of a panel this year. As a graduation present to Errol, I flew his mother, Mary, over to stay with us between the dissertation and the graduation, of which I was absolutely confident. Mary arrived 2 days before the dissertations, bringing her brand of overbearing mother down on Errol, adding to his stress, to say the least. We helped each other prepare and even solicited friends to create a mock panel. I kept thinking of Errol saying, "Failure is not an option." But when the smoke finally cleared, it was much ado about nothing, and we were both ultimately successful. There wasn't anybody in Oxford that day as proud of a child than Mary. Mary loved all the pomp and circumstance, and in particular the people with the Galileo hats, as she called them, and the elaborate gowns or capes. She threatened to make Errol the fanciest hat and gown Tasmania has ever seen if he reached such academic pomp. Uncle Artis took out an ad in the Hobart Mercury announcing Errol's achievement like he was the first Tasmanian with an education. His imminent return to Tasmania seemed more like a prophecy than an announcement. After graduation, Errol packed up his stuff and he and Mary returned to Tasmania. Errol was to prepare a game plan for us to continue our education with some local PhD opportunities in our field, as well as begin our business and set up our lab. He had contacted several universities that offered options either directly or online. I stayed in Oxford for a couple weeks to finalize the sale of the house. Carl had found a buyer who would be taking possession at the end of month. I didn't tell Errol yet, but I'd arranged with Carl to forward half of the profits from the sale of the house to his account. After all, if it wasn't for his work, the house wouldn't have sold for nearly as much as it did. It should provide him with enough capital for us to go into business together in Tasmania. Friends and schoolmates dropped by all week to help themselves to things we were leaving behind. Dick finally got through West Point and was given a posting in the field as a second lieutenant. His upward mobility was in the hands of his grandfather and father now that he was in the military. He told me he was attending a basic officer leader course, then taking branch-specific courses for the technical aspects of his specialty, which I understood was going to be military intelligence. Cheesy graduated with his master's degree as well. He was fortunate enough to have Darla accompany him to his graduation because his parents didn't make the journey, even though Las Vegas was so close and should have been enough of an attraction. If Las Vegas couldn't attract the Count, then nothing could. Cheesy was going to join us in Tasmania for the summer and hopefully stay to join our business. Companies are making huge headway in the area of folding proteins with the use of computer AI. Cheesy was trying to find an opportunity in AI for his PhD and may have found it at the University of Melbourne. That would fit together well with plans Errol and I had at the time. The Volcano Casino was almost open by then, so the One-Eyed Jacks and Darla had begun making publicity appearances. The One-Eyed Jacks were quickly building an American audience through the miracle of the internet, and with every appearance the subscriptions climb exponentially. That kept Uncle Sandu busy not only building the Volcano Casino, but beginning to construct new housing units and facilities for the growing self-traded team assembling at the Salton Sink in the United States under work permits. Sandy and Carl were busy working on plans for an underwater park they wanted to construct in the Salton Sea. Sandy was going to spend some time with the cell traders and meet with local contacts Dick's father arranged for him, but he's coming to Tasmania with us first. Ian was rapidly gaining his credentials as a doctor in Canada and was able to take a break in March to visit Windhaven, which I would imagine included some personal time with Jay as well. Jay continued to refuse to fly or even leave Kenya, so the only time Ian sees her is when he visits Windhaven. He told me he had some time to look for the rock structure we had spotted from Martin's balloon that day so long ago. When he and Jay finally found it, it was on the land that Sir Malcolm had given his father. Although he wanted to look through it, Jay sensed that it was best left as it was. Ian and I agreed to visit it the next time I made the journey to Windhaven and see what was of interest to Sir Malcolm. Was it home to an 8-legged creature that travels the African soil? Dr. Ben and Dr. Sue were excited by all of the new equipment that the lab was getting with the funds that were flowing into the Windhaven Trust Fund. They were able to purchase a fluorescence microscope that utilized light to study specimens in many important new ways for them. Green fluorescent protein, GFP, Equoria victoria consists of 238 amino acid residues that fluoresce green when exposed to UV light. Proteins can be tagged with GFP via genetic modification in order for a protein to be observed through fluorescence microscopy. That was a critical element for both Dr. Ben and Dr. Sue's research if they were going to study DNA modifications. Dick sent me an email indicating drive. Sue was having lots of sleepless nights due to all the new technology she was receiving. He told me, once her mind reaches a certain pace it's like Star Trek hyperspace kicks in and she's on warp 9. I just wait for her dilithium to run out. Ian told me Dr. Sue said, a fluorescent chemical, fluorophore, can absorb the light of specific wavelengths and then emit light of longer wavelengths. GFP tagging is a way to use the GFP as a fluorescent protein reporter by cloning the GFP in frame with the target protein at either the N or C terminus of the amino acid chain. They can now use GFP tagging to visualize proteins within living cells. They also picked up a phase contrast microscope that they plan to use for microscopic observation of unstained biological material. It displays the optical aspect of light to represent the solid, liquid, and gas phase changes as brightness differences. Not exactly the type of microscope that came with science and chemistry kits, and not one that I had a lot of personal experience with, to be honest. They're hoping to get a confocal microscope to team up with their fluorescence microscope, but some things have to be left to dreams, at least for the time being. Florin was busy making trips to Belgrade, Tbilisi, and parts unknown in the Soviet Union. He's working the Tesla trail trying to gain access to the 80 boxes of documents. There could be some real overlooked treasures there. He's also visiting Tbilisi, Georgia on the Phages Trail. The Phage Trail has led him further into the Soviet backwaters looking for a Russian doctor who it was rumored had made some interesting modifications of phage DNA. It was time now to leave the UK and make my way to Melbourne, Australia, where I was going to hook up with Cheesy, Magda, Krista, Dr. Ben, and Sandy before joining my father on his yacht. My dad had agreed to pick us up in Melbourne and deliver us to Hobart as his graduation gift to me, and I considered it to be a noble gesture by him. After all, how else could he express pride? My father told me he would be at the Port Melbourne Yacht Club to pick the group up by noon the next day, so we had an overnight stay in Melbourne. I booked us into the Crown Metropole Hotel on Melbourne's South Bank. The Crown was a 5-star hotel with a bar that had a panoramic city view. We were only there for one night, so I thought I would splurge and make this a memorable trip. My gift to myself. The flight to Melbourne was exhausting, and combined with the change in time zones, it hit me like a demolition ball. I made my way through the Melbourne airport, or as it was known here, the Tullamarine Airport. Stumbling through customs and pushing through the airport doors, I fell into the back of a waiting taxi. My driver told me it would be about a half-hour trip to the Crown Metropole, so I settled in for the ride. We took the Tullamarine Highway, better known perhaps as the M2. It was almost a straight drive along this highway to the hotel, and the driver pointed out where the old Essendon Airport used to be about halfway to our destination. Just to rub it in, I think. That's why he added the mate. Highway 2 changed its name a few times along the journey, and by the time we crossed the Moonee Ponds Creek it was called the City Link Toll Road, where I agreed to pay the toll rather than take a longer route. Eventually we pulled up in front of the Crown Metropole, a beautiful glass structure that would surely impress everyone. After all, it was 5-star. I checked into my room and decided to have a swim before everyone else arrived. It was my turn, on this journey, to answer the phone and send the taxis for everyone else. I had arranged this service with the concierge, Peter, so all that was left for me to do was relax. About an hour later Peter called to inform me that my guest from the United States and my 2 guests from Romania were on their way from the airport. The flight from India was delayed by an hour and the flight from Africa was due in about an hour and a half. Peter said he would monitor the situation and make sure they arrived safely in the hotel. I assumed that was what 5-star service was all about, but I couldn't help wondering what all this convenience was going to cost me. Then I thought about the joy of being independently wealthy. I got dressed in the new Armani suit that I had purchased for my graduation and went down to the lobby to greet Cheesy and the girls. It made me feel like the host, or Uncle Sandu perhaps, and I guess for this part of the trip I was. The cab pulled up and Cheesy saw me through the window. He jumped out of the car and ran over to give me a hug. It was always good to see him. Magda and Krista were slightly more reserved and directed the bellhops to their luggage before getting around to giving me a hug. They were both exited by the journey that lay ahead of us. Neither Magda nor Krista had been on a trip like this before, in that it was just for fun and not to work the circus. I let them get checked into their rooms and told them to meet me in the Mr. Hive bar when they were ready. I consulted Peter the concierge, Skip the bar manager, all the waiters, and every tourist I met to find out where the best place to party in Melbourne were if you only had one night to do it. Melbourne was a great place for nightlife, and in fact, as it turned out, all of Australia took their nightlife seriously. I was told the laneways of Melbourne were famous for bars with great music. Band posters piled up over decades advertised the long history of the city and Australian music in general. For a country with such a small population, Australian music impacted the world with groups like Skyhooks, Men at Work, AC/DC, In Excess, and Midnight Oil to name a few. Open-late restaurants abounded in that area and night owls migrated there until sunrise. That might be a great place to finish up, I thought. Waiters told me about tons of legendary bars in Melbourne we could visit, including the Ding Dong Lounge, Evelyn Hotel, Prince Bandroom, the Toff in town and the Howler. Others said Liverpool Street, which had a mixture of theatre and Chinatown, was full of surprises. I especially liked Peter's suggestion to begin if everyone arrived in time. You must view sunset from the Lee Bar on the 55th floor of the Rialto. It's an experience equal to the challenge of being the highlight of a one-night stay in Melbourne. Vintage champagne and famously delicious food, he said and kissed his fingers. This was going to be our first stop. I hope everyone gets here on time. He gave me some champagne recommendations, but I wasn't sure this was a vintage champagne group. Cheesy was the first to make it to the bar, and we discussed some of the places we could visit on our night in Melbourne. Before Magda and Krista arrived, the concierge phoned and said he had both Sandy and Dr. Ben in a taxi heading this way. That was great news because we could make the sunset at the Lee Bar. Magda and Krista joined us, and we had a few drinks while we discussed our plan of attack for the night and waited for the rest to arrive. The concierge was going to bring Sandy and Dr. Ben straight here and check them in. By the time they arrived, we had had a few drinks and greeted them with perhaps more zeal than they were expecting. It was great to see Sandy and Dr. Ben. Sandy introduced Dr. Ben to Magda and Krista. I heard all about the trip to Castle Sel Traded from Sue. What a trip, I'm sorry I missed that, he told them. Krista replied, oh, Dr. Sue told us about you, Big Ben. Which made him turn red from embarrassment, but he loved the attention and laughed out loud. We had a final drink while Sandy and Dr. Ben got changed for the night out. A car met us at the front door of the hotel, and it was a short trip across the Yarra River to where he dropped us off in front of the Rialto. We took the lift up 55 floors to the bar. Our timing couldn't have been better as the sun was just beginning to set at around 7:30. The next hour was spent mesmerized by the sights all around us and perhaps a little consumed by the alcohol, excitement, and jet lag. After the Lee Bar, we decided to walk back along the route our taxi took and stop at any bar that intrigued us. Several hours and bars later we found ourselves on the river promenade. We sat in a park on a series of benches next to an Aboriginal man who was playing his didgeridoo and watching the river traffic pass. We all said hello and I asked, "What's your name, or what should we call you?" Not knowing what proper cultural etiquette dictated. My name is Albert. I think that would be the best thing to call me if you wanted to get my attention, he said as he continued to blow through his didgeridoo, which created a low vibrating sound that seemed to reverberate across the water and echo back at us from the other shore. It was a haunting sound in this place we'd never been, and encountering a spiritual person like Albert almost out of the blue made it surreal. Eventually Albert told us he was a painter. He was reacquainting himself with the world of the white fella, so that he could appreciate his roots better. That was his inspiration for painting. Albert was from the McDonnell Ranges in Central Australia and would be returning there very soon. He had a few canvases in his pack that he unrolled for us to see. The beauty of the art earned an audible gasp from our group as our eyes met it for the first time. One picture showed a group of people on a journey to a land that was unknown to them. Albert interpreted the imagery for us, and we understood. His paintings were not like the white fellas that took a piece of time, because his paintings were a journey over time. It was only his to paint. The group in the painting encountered a number of creatures that they had never seen before and were different from any animals that they knew. These animals were in extreme danger from an enemy they couldn't see and appeared to come from somewhere else to harm them. Albert told us that the people were on a journey to save the animals, but the picture offered no conclusion to the story. His explanation was that the outcome had yet to be determined. His paintings came to him in an image, and he simply paints it to understand it. If the painting is of a journey, then this may only be the part of the journey and the journey has not finished. He assured us that if he was seeing the journey, then he must be part of it. Everything has a connection in some way whether we can see it or not, he told us. As he began to roll up the canvas, I asked, "Is your artwork for sale, Albert?" "Well, a fella has to eat. When I can get the supplies I need, I will be heading home," he replied, so we negotiated a fair price in his opinion, and I handed the canvas to Magda, who was particularly interested in it. She looked at me and said, "I'm glad you're wearing the amulet I gave you. It may protect us all before this journey is over," and she waved the rolled-up painting in my direction. We bid Albert a safe journey home and decided to return to the hotel for a few hours of sleep in our 5-star beds before our journey down to the waterfront to meet my father at noon. I knew I would be back to Australia once I relocated to Tasmania. There was just too much to see and do here. The DNA of Aboriginal people intrigued me as it did drive Ben. As I understood it, there were DNA connections between Australian Aboriginals and the people of southern India. That would mean that Australian Aboriginals got on board at the Pangaea station before it left India for its current location. I'm not sure what that does to the out of Africa theory, but I need to put that on my future path of discovery. Their beliefs in the dreamland were just as intriguing to Sandy, and he wanted to explore more of Australia as well. It was a pleasant stroll back to the hotel, and none of us felt the drop in temperature until our drop in alcohol levels. In what we called morning the next day, we met in the dining room for a quick breakfast, then I thanked Peter the concierge and paid the bill. In retrospect, I could have flown the entire group here for the same price as 3 hours of sleep on a 5-star bed. There was no time for yoga that day. Peter had a car ready to take us to the Port Melbourne Yacht Club, and we all climbed in while the bellhops loaded our luggage in. It was a beautiful sunny day in Melbourne, and not as scorching hot as it could be at other times of the year. We were looking forward to being on the water. Everyone else unloaded the car and organized our luggage while I went down to the pier to see if I could spot my father's boat. I scanned the waiting yachts, but his familiar red and blue lion motif sail didn't appear. I would recognize it furled or unfurled. I had had to find it many times over the years in various states of consciousness. Then a sinking feeling hit me, and I wondered if perhaps he wouldn't be here. He had been reliable in the past, but perhaps I had just run out of luck. Then I thought, no, he's just late. I scanned for the sea lion again, and one yacht looked vaguely familiar, but it wasn't the sea lion. Then I saw my father on the bow looking towards me with his hand over his eyes. He was older and thinner than I remembered, but I was sure it was him. I waved and he waved back, and then began his walk towards the locked gate we had our luggage piled in front of. Cheesy came up beside me and said, "So that's the old man, is it?" Then the rest of the group joined us, and we proceeded through the gate to be greeted by dear old Dad. "Welcome to Melbourne, everyone. I'm Wesley, but you can call me Wes or Captain Wes," he said, and we began the introductions all around. On the short stroll to the yacht, I managed to ask him about the yacht, and he said, "Let's leave that story for dinner tonight. Right now, we have 6 new passengers coming aboard. I would like to leave the port by 2 if possible. All aboard the Eastern Dragon bound for Hobart," he announced, and his crew helped us locate our berths and stow our gear. Eric was still his first mate, and I knew him well. This yacht was considerably bigger than the Sea Lion, my father's yacht. I had envisioned us camping out in sleeping bags on the deck, but we were able to pair up and find accommodation. The boys let Magda and Krista have the first pick of the 3 accommodations. Cheesy and I shared a room, and Cheesy took the upper berth. Dr. Ben and Sandy claimed their places in the 3rd one. Once we had settled in, we began to drift up to the deck just as we were weighing anchor hour and leaving port. The porter brought us drinks, and we settled down in the deck chairs to watch our departure. The buildings of Melbourne slowly drifted into the distance. I was keeping an eye on everyone to see if they were showing signs of motion sickness, but they all seemed to be handling it well. I patted the Dramamine pills in my pocket just to make sure I had them, and thought it best not to ask anyone how they felt. We sailed out from Port Phillip Bay past Half Moon Bay, Swan Island, and then on to Victory Bight and our first Southern Ocean experience. I tapped the Dramamine pills again and scanned the group, but the day was glorious with little wind and calm seas, so they all seemed fine. This wonderful weather wouldn't last a whole 7-day trip, I was sure of that. The swells increased dramatically as we entered the Bass Strait, but this was a large vessel and able to stabilize well, or perhaps my father was a good captain. After all, he'd had a lifetime of experience. Eric came down to tell us that the crew would be preparing for dinner, which should coincide with today's sunset at 7:30. Dinner will be below deck tonight. The weather's quite nice for this time of year, but it can get chilly at night, he told us. Then I realized, the seasons are reversed below the equator, and this is winter. It never really dawned on me until now, because they had a very mild winter. Today it was almost 20 degrees, and last night we probably had too much alcohol to notice the dip. I'll bet it's going to be hot in summer down here. Everyone used the time to get ready for this evening's dinner and rearranged the personal areas which were never spacious on any vessel of this type. Cheesy couldn't wait to grill Captain Wes about his only son. He was up to something. I saw him explaining his plan to the girls. He didn't want me to figure out what he was showing them. Let him have his fun, I thought. Forewarned is forearmed. Knowledge in advance enables one to be prepared, but knowledge of what? Suspicion of what? Not much to go on unless you're Senator McCarthy. We strolled back on deck as we each were ready, and the porter brought us drinks at the railing where we looked out over the late afternoon ocean. Australia was a distant glow with no other land on the horizon in the other direction. We were in the Bass Strait, an area of the Southern Ocean that lay between Australia and Tasmania. It's shallow by ocean depths and sits on a shelf with Australia, but is still deep enough for whales. Magda hoped to see a variety of whales on this trip, as this was supposedly a hotspot for breeding whales of many species. Sometimes they appeared in great numbers along with other large ocean mammals. The deck was set with lights strung around the upper deck that gave the whole area a magical glow. Then it hit me. The Eastern Dragon. Of course, the Duchess. When we entered the dining area, there she was on my father's arm. He could see the shock on my face, but simply smiled as he led the Duchess to her seat first. "Sit down everyone and welcome to the captain's table." I sat next to Magda and Cheesy on one side and Krista sat between Drive, Ben and Sandy. My father took his spot in the captain's chair. As soon as he sat down, the stewards brought the soup. He looked at me over his spoon and said in a matter-of-fact manner, "I believe you know the Duchess." I looked at her and smiled, and she looked back and smiled at me. "But what you don't know is that the Duchess is your stepmother." The clinking of bowls and spoons stopped immediately. A couple of coughs were stifled with napkins. "I suppose you'd like to know how this came about." To which I replied, "It would certainly fill in some blanks for me." The Duchess has a place near Po Toi Island in the South China Sea, not too far from Hong Kong. I don't know if you're familiar with that part of the world, but it's an extremely beautiful but an extremely dangerous place. The Sea Lion and the Eastern Dragon were moored off the Duchess Island when pirates took over the Sea Lion. He told us. "Pirates?" Magda and Krista exclaimed almost at once. I could see Cheesy was suitably intrigued by that as well. "Did they steal the Sea Lion?" I asked. "Not quite. They wanted us to transport a bunch of crates to a destination in the Philippines. We were told to take the Eastern Dragon, and they would remain on the Sea Lion to follow at a discreet distance. If we successfully delivered the packages, they would rendezvous with us and return the Sea Lion to me, but we knew that was nonsense. Would you like to add anything up to this point, Duchess?" And she replied, "No, you're doing a splendid job, dearest." We sailed out of Po Toi and had to navigate the South China Sea in a particularly bad pressure system. The route lay through the Calamian Islands in the Philippines to Cuyo Island in the Cuyo Archipelago. The route I laid out meant sailing past Manila. We had 3 of the pirates on board with us to watch our every move. "OMG, weren't you scared?" "What did you do?" Magda asked. They were more pirate than sailor, so we were able to confuse them easily enough. Eric and I have been together forever on every type of vessel that floats and in similar situations as well. Pirates are not uncommon in this part of the world. Eric got a message out to the Manila Coast Guard, who pulled us up for a routine inspection. They arrested the pirates on board, but not before they could radio the other pirates on the Sea Lion. "What was in the crates?" I asked. Funny you should ask. The crates were full of weapons. Rocket launchers, machine guns, bazookas, and more. There were about 20 crates. They were well equipped for something, Cheesy noted. That's why the police in the Philippines decided to detain us and determine exactly what our involvement really was. The Duchess was able to contact the US Embassy, who immediately had her released to their custody. Unfortunately, I was not quite so lucky. My embassy was ready to let me fry or at least stew for a while. Our only recourse for a quick release was for the Duchess and I to get married. Then the US Embassy could secure my release as well, he said, and placed his hands on the table like that was the end of the story. Okay, let's start with the questions. It sounds like the US Embassy went to an awful lot of trouble for a mere citizen. Are you the Duchess of New York? I asked my new stepmother. Actually, my full name is Abigail Susan Montgomery. My father is Senator Montgomery from Alabama. So yeah, maybe Duchess of Alabama. She replied and smiled. Cheesy asked, so that explains how you got out of that jam, but where does the Duchess come from? My first husband was Jimmy Young. If you're from this part of the world, you know the name. In China, if you can sell something for 2 yuan that you only paid 1 yuan for, you can do it 100 million times. And if that thing is available every day, you can repeat that process every day for decades. That can add up to a great deal of yuan eventually. Jimmy was an underground newspaper publisher with an audience that would make Rupert Murdoch drool. He brought news of the outside world into China as well as brought the inside world of China out. Information is power. That was a China that foreign devils like us will never know. What happened to Jimmy, Duchess? Magda asked. With that much wealth and that much knowledge, Jimmy was a very powerful man with very powerful enemies. He sailed off to China one day on what was supposed to be a normal business trip, but that business trip never ended. The Chinese were quick to pronounce him dead for their own purposes, which was to dry up his publishing network, which fell to pieces. For me, as his wife, I got everything that was his at the time. That was about 12 years ago. But that doesn't explain the name, Cheesy persisted. Jimmy was a man of image and face, as most Chinese are. The Chinese also revere royalty, even if it's royalty from another land. Jimmy had persuasive documents that indicated I was a duchess and that everyone must refer to me by my title. After a few years I began to enjoy the name, and after a few more years I thought, what the hell, I've still got the documents. I'll keep the name. And everyone still calls me Duchess, even Wes. If it offends ya darlin', ya can call me Abby Sue, she said in a southern drawl which made everyone laugh. Cheesy then announced, Eric, I think it's time to get Captain Wes and the Duchess caught up on what they've missed. To which Eric replied, I myself have some gaps in that area, Cheesy. As he wheeled out a large screen monitor and Cheesy plugged his phone in. The next 12 minutes showed every fail I had ever had since Ridgeway. Cheesy contacted everyone he could for images and videos that captured every broken bone, bloody nose, stitch, bruise, cut and scape I ever got in both forward and reverse multiple times. I think he had placed the ladies in charge of the sound effects because they giggled every time they heard a particular fail sound where I feel on my ass. Eric, my dad, and the Duchess weren't short of tears of laughter either. There were a couple of knee slaps and hands over mouth moments, but we eventually made it through without total embarrassment. On that note, we finished the dinner of fish that the crew had caught earlier in the afternoon and then put on sweaters to have coffee and drinks on deck. Although it was a little cool, the moon was full, the wind was only a couple knots under a clear sky. There's a smell your mind associates with that environment once you've been in it, just as stepping off the plane in India never leaves you. Captain Wes and Eric briefed us on the journey that lay ahead. The 435 nautical mile journey from Melbourne to Hobart has started out in light 10 to 15 knot conditions. We constantly monitor weather, and currently see an approaching low-pressure system which might give you a bit of concern overnight, but for experienced crews these are not the difficult conditions we might worry about. I personally have not done this route before, but I have several friends from Melbourne and Sydney who have. They tell me that sometimes on this journey the problem is lack of wind. Autohelm and navigation technology is amazing these days, so we should have a comfortable journey on the Eastern Dragon. Enjoy your dreams and let the ocean lull you to sleep tonight, Captain Wes advised. What's the route we're taking? I asked. Eric produced a large map of the area and pointed out our route with his finger. The Eastern Dragon will be sailing to the west of King Island. Although this is a longer route, we'll avoid the rough conditions that can be present in the gap between King Island and NW, Tasmania, especially if a system is moving in or out. After all, we want you to have a good night's sleep on your first night at sea. And everyone laughed. Eric continued, by morning we should be west of King Island, where we expect the wind to shift south and strengthen to 25 knots. What's that in kilometers per hour? Cheesy wondered and Eric replied, that's equal to about 45 kilometers per hour. Eric continued on, at that point we'll head south to Halle Bailey and then on to Porpoise Shoal and the mainland, where we'll run down the coast to the southwest cape about 200 nautical miles away. Captain Wes added, our path passes down the western coast past Macquarie Harbour and some very rugged terrain according to my friend Norm. Very few roads, or even paths, just lots of the densest forest on Earth, extremely difficult to navigate through. If we stay closer to the coast, we should have some amazing views and perhaps even put in for a day if you see something of interest. The only timetable for this trip is your connection at the other end. The Duchess and I aren't due back in Sydney for a few weeks. Magda said, maybe we will see a thylacine, and Cheesy asked, what's that? Magda told us about her research on the subject. It's the Tasmanian tiger that was made extinct by humans just 70 years ago. Many people believe they still exist in Tasmania. Fair enough. You just give me a whistle when you see one, darling, and I'll find a parking spot. Captain Wes volunteered. Eventually we ran through everyone's life story that night over enough drinks to cast the curse of snoring on the team. We stumbled our way to our assigned berths, where I lay in my bunk listening to the wind in the sails, the lapping of the waves, and so many snoring shipmates, mouth open, snore. In the morning, the Eastern Dragon was west of King Island and the weather had changed from the previous night to strong 50 to 60 knot winds. Eric informed us, we've come through the worst of these conditions over the last 3 or 4 hours and will be passing through the front soon. The worst of the low pressure system has passed, and you slept through it. Which wasn't totally true, as I had to dish out a few of my motion sickness pills to Sandy and Krista. Needless to say, it was difficult to maintain our yoga stances. Weather beyond the front to the coast will be improving as we get closer to Tasmania. Enjoy a leisurely breakfast. Eric recommended it. Below King Island the wind abated and shifted west. Our plan was to sail to Halle Bailey Island and then on to the Porpoise Shoals before turning to the coast, as my dad had informed us. The sailing was different now too, as the ocean was in long swells with prevailing westerly winds. The Southern Ocean region is the habitat for many whale species, including the humpback, minke, blue, southern right and fin. Thousands of humpbacks, southern right and blue whales swim through the Southern Ocean between June and November to migrate north off Western Australia. The eastern side of Tasmania offers much better whale watching according to Magda, who had been researching whales on the internet. Magda was determined to see whales and lots of them. Killer whales may also appear with so much prey in the water. She warned and then added, and perhaps even a great white shark. Cheesy interjected, as long as it isn't the Kraken or Architeuthis. Then drive. Ben chipped in, or Cthulhu. And Krista added, Aquaman wouldn't be a bad option. Magda was obsessed with the whales and quoted us any new information she came across as and when she learned it. There was a time when residents complained of being kept awakened by the sounds of whales snorting in the River Derwent. That's the river running through bloody Hobart. In the 1830s, there were enough whales in Tasmanian waters to support 32 shore-based whaling stations. All on the east coast, I might add. That must be where the majority of the whales migrate, so the bastards just wait there for them sharpening their harpoons. And Cheesy added, filthy bushwhackers. Quote, there was a time when the numbers of massive southern right whales made crossing the Hobart estuary in a small boat extremely dangerous. Today, the southern right whale is among the rarest of whale species. All those whale families wiped out or left without parents, Magda said, and I think she shed a tear on that one. Most whale sightings occur on Tasmania's east coast. Humpback and southern right whales prefer the calmer waters of the east coast. She made me promise we would stop at these places she had highlighted on our land journey. I had to agree, or she was going to cast a spell of seasickness on me. Whales migrate north through Tasmanian waters from May each year to travel to their calving grounds, before returning to southern feeding grounds from mid-August to November. Our timing is exquisite, the stars must be aligned. I should check tonight for all of us. Not all encounters with whales are positive. There are more strandings in Tasmania than in any other Australian state. In the Macquarie Harbour area, the worst beaching happened with several pods of over 200 animals each. Dr. Ben informed us, and Magda asked, that's exactly where we're going, isn't it? And I had to reply, yes. Cheesy was teasing Magda about her whale obsessions, so she informed us, whales, of course, are mammals. Warm-blooded, breathe air and suckle their young on milk. Along with dolphins, they belong to a group of mammals known as cetaceans. Just letting you science boys know who they are before we meet them. To which Cheesy replied, gee thanks, where were you when I needed a roommate at uni? And Krista chimed in your dreams. It was late afternoon by the time Eric pointed out Lighthouse Beach Lighthouse, which was now visible through binoculars in the distance. That was mainland Tasmania. Australia, with Tasmania attached, left Pangaea 140 million years ago as India separated from Antarctica and Australia opened up the Indian Ocean. During the Cretaceous period, Australia slowly drifted away from Antarctica as they both journeyed to their current positions. Dr. Ben believes the origin of the Aboriginal people was aboard the continent when it set sail from India. Scholars claim Aborigines appeared in Australia only 50,000 years ago, and up to 10,000 years ago, they migrated to Tasmania across a land bridge known as the Bassian Plain. Before the last glacial maximum, which caused sea levels to drop about 120 meters and created a continuous landmass that stretched between Papua New Guinea and Tasmania. The Bass Strait became an impassable barrier about 12,000 years ago when sea levels rose again, cutting everyone off. This happened during the ice age we are currently in. Where did Tasmania come from if it wasn't attached to Australia? Why were humans not already aboard during the journey from India? Sandy piped in, sea levels rose to form the Bass Strait about 12,000 years ago, isolating anyone or anything left on Tasmania. That was the same time as Dwarka was sinking into the Arabian Sea. An extremely important time in Hindu mythology. Adam's bridge from India to Sri Lanka disappeared at that same time. Sandy had looked into the Tasmanian culture before coming on this trip. The Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the Palawa, are an isolated population of Australian Aboriginal people according to science. Supposedly they were cut off from the mainland by way of the Bass Strait. We do know for sure that their population when Europeans arrived was about 4,000, he told us. Dr. Ben added, I would love to do a DNA study of that migration and even tie it back to India. That could swing the pendulums of world history. And Sandy nodded his head in approval. Sandy continued, the first permanent white settlement in Tasmania was 1803. Just 1 year later, an unprovoked attack by whites on a group of Aboriginal people was the first episode in what became known as the Black War. The whites treated Aboriginal people as subhuman, seizing their hunting grounds, depleting their food supply, attacking the women, and killing the men. What did they do to fight back? Dr. Ben asked. Attempts to resist were met with the superior firepower and the force of the Europeans. To prevent their final extermination, 200 Aboriginal people agreed to be removed to Flinders Island. That was all that was left of the 4,000, and they would have been victimized. That's where you may find ancient DNA. The government eventually created the Aboriginal Lands Act in 1995 to begin returning control of significant places like the Cape Barren Islands to the Aboriginal community. And I said, you can't find justice in a situation like this by today or any time. Regrets don't change the past, they can only change the future. Time is linear and these people are gone never to return. Their pendulums have been pushed beyond their pivots. Justice occurs after disaster in the algorithm, unfortunately, Cheesy said, and Sandy concluded. By the turn of the century, more than 19,000 Tasmanians claimed Aboriginal status, which has led to questions of authenticity. That's one for you, Dr. Ben, who replied, yeah, it gets more intriguing all the time. Not if you can see it coming, Magda exclaimed. She held up her magical divination sticks and said, tonight we see what's coming. I expected lightning to crack or at least a giant to rise out of the ocean, but when Eric announced over the microphone, whale ahoy! We were all stunned. We scanned the horizon but didn't see them. 10 o'clock, there they are, Doctor. Ben pointed to the position. They were pilot whales and not the big blue or southern rights, but there were many of them. Magda started to try and identify them and count them. Lot whales can travel in pods of more than 200. Everyone let Magda have the big binoculars so she could watch them as closely as possible and then tell Krista what to write down for her in her notes. I saw Cheesy connect his phone to a small telescope device he took out of his kit bag and quietly watch the whales on his screen. The show went on for almost an hour as it seemed we were both following the same path. At one point a dolphin pod joined in on the fringe working as scouts for the whales. I didn't think we were going to be able to drag her away from the rail when Eric called us for dinner. It was only with a promise to return later that she relented. The dinner was fish again and I could already see a pattern developing. A bit of fish is actually good for a change. When we're in port, we eat a lot of shellfish and the like. We know that when we go to sea, we can catch all the fish we want to eat. A chef that's good with fish is important and we have one of the best in Hong Kong. Captain Wes told us. After dinner Magda announced that she would cast anyone's fortune who wanted it done. Captain Wes was quick to jump in and I could see the Duchess was fascinated by the whole process. I just love predictions, magic, curses, spells, voodoo, whatever it is. Magda and Krista spread the geomancy cloth on the table and showed everyone the sticks to explain the process. The Duchess turned to Captain Wes and said, I gotta have me some of those fancy sticks. I made a mental note for next Christmas. Still had pieces left over. Captain Wes pressed his question forward, will Eric and I win the West Coaster race this year? And Eric quickly jumped in, hey, I'm saving my question for myself. He sides, if it's yes for you then I know I do too, so don't waste my question. Captain Wes replied, not if I throw you off the boat. And we all laughed. What's the West Coaster, Dad? And he looked a little sheepish and replied, by coincidence, it's a race from Melbourne to Hobart. And I chirped in, and you're doing your homework. 2 birds, 1 stone. Quote. Cheesy jumped in with, what's the prize? And Eric said, in the 1970s prizes included gold and silver ingots and sovereigns, then later they were upgraded to include gold-plated solid silver ingots hand-painted by Pro Heart for each major place getter. The 3 main ingots were approximately the same length as a house brick and the painting was described by Pro Heart as the most detailed work he'd ever done. Krista asked, who or what is Pro Heart? Kevin Hart was an Australian artist and part of the Broken Hill group painting the Australian outback. He was nicknamed the Professor when he was young and a bit of an inventor. Eric said, I've seen some of Jack Absalom's paintings from that same group. He also did a series of outback living videos. I said, and Cheesy asked, I wonder if Albert knew these white fellas. And I guess it was possible. Captain Wes continued, the record shows 4 years when 1/3 or more of the fleet didn't finish. The race attracted as many as 65 yachts making the same journey, were making in a week in just 3 days and 14 hours. Dr. Ben informed us, okay, I know my question I'm going to ask on my turn. And you're all going to owe me. Are we going to make it this time? And everyone laughed hysterically. Okay, let's view the future. Bring on the first mother, Magda said, and Krista placed a veil over Magda's head for effect. It was a very Arabian Nights setting with the flickering lights and ocean breeze. I thought I could smell jasmine. As she rolled the sticks around in the palms of her hands, Magda asked in a slow, methodical voice, will Captain Wes and his crew win the West Coaster race this year? And when Magda threw the sticks down onto the table, I could see the Duchess give a visible shudder like someone had just walked over her soul. Krista began picking up the sticks for her and said, 1 peepers, 2 peepers, 1 peepers and 1 peepers. And Magda said, fire is active, air is passive, water is active, and earth is active. The first mother has revealed herself as Pure the boy. Is that good? The Duchess asked, and I whispered, they're just getting started, but he represents male aggression, so in a race that's probably good. Tell us then who your second mother is. And she cast the sticks on the table again. Krista picked them up and said, Caput Draconis. The third and fourth mothers were cast and revealed as Tristisha and Pure again. Cheesy had created a phone app for the girls which was much quicker with the calculations beyond the four mothers, and they simply filled in the chart and kept talking their mystifying circus lingo. Your question related to a journey, Captain. Where's Sir the niece that resides in house the 9th of May have some impact on the journey in question. Via resides in house 9 to represent the way. The way can be bad for many things, but not when it comes to a journey. We need Via on our journey, Magda said and looked at me. This leads us down to the judge who has been cast as Cauda Draconis. The Count is considered very bad in many situations, but he is very good at ending things. In addition, he brings good with evil. Oh, my goodness, what does that mean? Does it mean I will finish but not win, or that I will win? What does it mean? And the Duchess comforted him and said, I heard, good at finishing, and right now that's good enough for me. We're not quite finished yet. We still have the sentence to look at and see if it shines some light on the journey. Acquisitio is your sentence. He's good where the gain or acquisition of something is important, Magda said, and the Duchess proclaimed, see. I'm next. The Duchess said and jumped up and down in her chair until Magda said, okay, Duchess, what's your question? Are we ever going to find out what happened to Jimmy Young? Quote. Magda cast the first mother. 1, 1, 1, 1. Via, the road. That's very interesting since we are looking for the outcome of a journey. Let's cast the second mother. 1, 1, 1, 1. Oh my, Via again. The road or path must be a very important part of the solution to what happened to Jimmy Young. The third mother may shed some light on it. Magda cast the sticks, and as everyone looked on, she did not have to announce what they were. Via, again. I can't believe it. Let's cast the final mother. She picked up the sticks and warmed them in her hands and then joined hands with the Duchess and let her feel the sticks as well. When they came to rest on the table, half the people shouted, Via. And the rest shouted, 1, 1, 1, 1. I thought the Duchess was going to faint. Magda said, who's in house 9, the house governing journeys? It's Populus. And Populus is also your judge. This is amazing. Look, Via is the sentence. Via is the opposite of Populus. Populus is everything Via is not, still, stable, reflective, and she is willing to stay at home and let someone else change the world. Via is pure activity while Populus is pure passivity. Populus is the only figure without any active elements. Both Populus' inner and outer elements are water. Water is a central theme here, as Jimmy's journey was on water, which can just as easily be fast-flowing and turbulent like Via, or smooth, calm, reflective, and clear as Populus. The outcome may be based on the people within the crowd. Populus is within a group of people and that group has movement, but a crowd of people with no leader has no direction. Given an impetus or stimulus to start its pendulum swinging, the crowd follows the leader. Lemmings, each and every one. When a leaderless crowd of people encounters someone with the energy and direction to lead, they become followers and take on the energy and direction of that leader. Does this say anything about Jimmy, Duchess? The Duchess, Wes and I knew more of Jimmy and saw so many uncanny parallels, it was astounding. Populus has the collective consciousness of the moon, and its collective personality of spirits as well. Populus' association with the body is through the breasts and torso, Magda continued. The Duchess asked, what do you think all that means? That was the scaled-down analysis that we give the science boys. Krista, you, and I will explore some of the more mystical signs that have revealed themselves in these characters. There is much more astrology here if you are interested, and trust me, this is a very unusual divination. Magda suggested, and the Duchess was all for it. But first Magda had to divine a few more questions. Sandy asked, will we solve the riddle of the puzzle box? Magda cast the four mothers who created Cauda Draconis as the judge. She's only good in circumstances for ending or completing things, such as breaking up relationships. Cauda brings good with evil, and evil with good, and both inner and outer elements are fire. I think that's both positive and confusing. Sandy said, and everyone laughed. Dr. Ben asked, as I promised I'm gonna ask, are we going to make it this time? Quote. Magda cast the four mothers who created Via as the judge. Via is very popular tonight. She is considered bad for many things, but as we know she looks favorably upon roads, travels, or journeys. So, I think you will be fine, Dr. Ben, to which he replied, now I can sleep at night. Cheesy jumped in, then that was Sandy we heard snoring last night. And again we all laughed. Magda continued around the table and everyone had an opportunity to ask their question. Afterwards, Krista, Magda, and the Duchess retired to the cabin while we stayed on deck to enjoy the evening sky. We could feel the wind blowing from the mainland as we stood on the bow under the full moon. This was another full moon sky on a crystal clear night to file away with the Salton Sea, Windhaven, Mount Kenya, Castle Sel Tradit and the Nainital skies. It was also time to let the ocean carry us away to the dreamtime again. In the morning we sailed past Bluff Hill Point and the Arthur River where beaches battled row upon row of waves crashing in on them creating sandy bands that stretched forever. Many sections of roads actually ran along the beach because the terrain was far too dense to build conventional roads. Beaches were well above high tide at any time of the year. This truly was the wild side of Tasmania with impassable forests that were incredibly dense with vegetation. Points of interest along the coast were known as rocks. Sarah Ann Rocks, Lobster Rocks and Kudu Rocks were all places that would rock your boat's pendulum if you weren't careful and stumbled onto them on a dark or stormy night. We passed Tema, which was on the coast in a small area of different habitat from the forests around it. It was also on a wonderful, secluded bay with a sandy beach. Further down the coast was Tema Harbour which connected by road to the Tema area to the north of the harbour. We made our way through Hazard Bay which took a bite out of the mainland to sandy Cape Beach where we dropped anchor in a sheltered bay behind Bear Rock for the night. Captain Wes had been told about this area by his friend Norm who also warned him about snakes. The best places can be the most dangerous. Careful mate or you'll be taken a sickie. Sandy decided to break out the fishing gear and have a go at filling the pot for dinner. Eric and a few of his shipmates were going snorkeling for shellfish so Cheesy and Dr. Ben decided to join them. It was way too cold for me get in. The girls had a good laugh when Cheesy told them that the speedos the crew were wearing were referred to as budgie smugglers down there. Eric warned of several deadly creatures to be on the lookout for. That's the primary reason Sandy, the girls and I didn't go on that quest, to be honest. That and the cold. After a late afternoon swim in the water off the beach that was a little chillier than everyone expected, we were ready for the hearty bonfire on the beach that was already beginning to blaze away. Eric and the crew had set up a big fire pit with a pot to boil the lobsters they caught today. Crabs and other crustaceans were thrown in the pot and I would have to learn about the mystery crustaceans while consuming them. The fish we caught today was seasoned, wrapped in tinfoil, and placed around the barbie. Captain Wes warned us, there are not a lot of dangerous creatures in Tasmania, but they do have a very poisonous snake known as the tiger snake. Beware of this snake because his venom can kill you in as little as 7 hours. We have compression bandages but no antivenom so should we have an accident we will have to contact the Coast Guard for search and rescue. I know a guy in the Philippines that sells snakes, Eric said. Alfonso told me these snakes are not necessarily aggressive, but they don't back down when challenged. He seemed to slow his pace down to emphasize each word. Do not approach this snake if you see one. Back away but be careful where you walk because there could be another one behind you. Alfonso also told me they like to share habitat and live in colonies. 1 drop of venom can kill 7 people. Sweet little guys. Cheesy said. We only have rattlesnakes in California. When you're in the water watch out for jellyfish, cone snails, blue-ringed octopus and the regular culprits that like to ruin a beach trip by poking, sticking or stinging you. You could even encounter a stingray or shark. Hell, an orca for that matter, Captain Wes added. The lobster was great, and everyone tried the various treats Eric and his crew brought up from the depths for us. Magda brought out her guitar and Krista her flute and violin. We sat on the beach around the fire listening to Magda play haunting rhythms on her guitar and sing while Krista played several flute solos and a magnificent soulful violin solo that made the Duchess cry. It was late by the time we packed up and made it back to the Eastern Dragon, so it was not long before the ocean claimed us in its rocking arms to send us back to dreamland. The expression, drunken sailor, is making so much more sense these days. Snore, snore. Sandy Cape Lighthouse had the most magnificent unused harbour in the world bar none. There are so many pristine places along this coast that it's impossible to think we could run out of places to live on this earth. It was gorgeous beach, land, and forest all the way down the coast to Hardwick Bay. Look at this land and tell me every thylacine has been hunted down and killed. They couldn't do it if they wanted to. I feel them here, Magda proclaimed. 4 Mile Beach was a sight, with a farm track running alongside other vehicles and we knew there was access to this area somehow other than by boat. Granville Harbour was another magnificent harbour, but the one had a small village located at the end of it. Cannonball Bay, Tucker's Creek, and a lot of grassy pastures between dense forest patches. Just breathtaking. We spent some time at Henty Dunes which is along Ocean Beach and seemed to stretch forever. There were many areas like that along the coast where dunes seemed to stretch for kilometers before the forest finally stuck up a wall. The next morning was a little overcast and a wee bit on the cool side, but when meditating one is supposed to be able to shut external influences out. Cold weather slowed the exit from the cabin for some until they were suitably full of hot coffee and wearing the heaviest sweater any of us brought. This was rugged country and never tamed by anyone, not even the early explorers like Abel Tasman, who was sent by his boss, Van Diemen, to conquer that land. Tasmania took all the British prisoners that even Australia couldn't handle. We were heading down the coast towards Hell's Gate, the entrance to Macquarie Harbour where one of the world's most notorious prisons was located and also the site where hundreds of pilot whales were beached. This area wasn't really speaking out to me, but it certainly was to the girls. Cheesy sat beside me on the deck and told me, Magda is staying in bed this morning. Krista says she's not feeling well and even the Duchess has looked in on her. Dr. Ben added, I saw her this morning when I took her and Krista some coffee and I think she may have a bit of a fever. Maybe it was an allergy to one of the shellfish we ate. We all ate several things we hadn't eaten before. I couldn't help but feel there were energies in the sea air blowing off the land that the rest of us were not feeling, but somehow, she was. Energies that traveled along the ether or electromagnetic field or a dozen other fields that could be bringing a message from the souls it's encountering or disturbing. Sandy noted, I read the Macquarie Harbour Penal Station was a former British colonial penal settlement on Sarah Island which is inside Macquarie Harbour. It operated for about 10 years in the early 1800s. The penal colony was one of the harshest prisons in the Australian colonies and served the British as Devil's Island served the French. He was right. Errol had enlightened me about this place but didn't know we'd be taking this route. To reach the prison from the ocean, a craft must navigate the only seaward access which was through a treacherous narrow channel known as Hell's Gates. The Eastern Dragon was capable of entering the harbour, but we did not go into the harbour on this trip, simply sailing past. Tidal currents are brutal in that part of the ocean, resulting in deaths of convicts before they even reached Sarah Island to begin their sentence. Today's autohelm and navigation controls are probably quite capable, but this is not a place I want to dwell in anyway. Perhaps someday we can visit it from the land side because even Cheesy and I can feel something that creates an unsettled feeling in us. Cheesy said, this place has bad juju. Dr. Ben told us, listen to this, Lieutenant Governor Sorrell needed the prison to be economically viable so the British government wouldn't squabble about funds when compensating him. The island was cleared to expose the settlement to the howling gales of the legendary wind known as the Roaring Forties. The island couldn't produce food and that caused malnutrition, dysentery, and scurvy. Lashings were common, but listen to this, it was the habit at this prison that the lashing was administered by another convict. When the lashing was not administered with sufficient gusto, the prisoner was lashed himself. Convicts were lashed to death. In a single year over 9,000 lashings were given. Holy Christ, how could you survive day to day like that? I asked in a rhetorical sort of way. Cheesy pointed out, as always in a story of this type there are a few who persevere and manage to escape their captors. Sarah Island's most infamous escapee was Alexander Pierce, who managed to get away more than once. He read from the internet. On his first venture he brought several friends along with him. When they ran out of food, they decided to cannibalize a fellow escapee. They continued on their journey but eventually required the sustenance of another companion. Finally, Alex decided he was still hungry and finished off his last mate. Sandy said, I think I would rather have good taste than be good tasting. Cheesy went on to say, eventually Alex was caught and returned to Sarah Island, but a few weeks later he persuaded another companion to go with him and off they went on their travels. This time Alex had to stop for a snack just a couple days after leaving Sarah Island. I told him not to take that guy. He's just too tasty looking. Dr. Ben said and got the laugh he was looking for. He should have chosen a less tasty travel mate if he was serious about escaping. Then Dr. Ben added, they aren't all bad. The Cypress was a boat on its way to Macquarie Harbour Penal Station carrying supplies and convicts. The ship was becalmed in Recherche Bay, so the convicts were allowed on deck. Given the opportunity they attacked the guards and took control, marooning officers, soldiers, and other convicts without supplies as they sailed off to Canton, China. There, they scuttled the Cypress and claimed to be castaways from another vessel. Smart move. Cheesy approved. I added, they even have a Papillon moment. When the station was closing down, 10 convicts were permitted to remain and finish building a boat. When finished, they sailed the boat down the river, out to sea, and off to Chile. Now that's a proper ending to a movie. We passed what seemed like 100 kilometers of pristine sandy beach along the coast on our approach to Hell's Gate, which led into Macquarie Harbour. The harbour itself was absolutely huge by planetary standards at over 300 square kilometers, which was 6 times the size of Sydney Harbour. It's very shallow at only 15 meters, but some deeper pockets exist up to 50 meters. The Aboriginal name for the harbour was Paralangatek. Cheesy noted, Guards from the prisons would hunt swans by the bag full in the inlet because they were so plentiful. When molting, they cannot fly for 3 months. The guards would simply club them with the oars. They practically wiped them out of existence within the 10 years they were here. This seems like a place where animals are trapped by man and exterminated to the very end. Magda added, "That's so true, Cheesy. We've already heard of the whales which are trapped as they migrate to birth their families. The Tasmanian tiger was hunted down by bounty for crimes he didn't commit. The final tiger was left to freeze outside of his cage in the Hobart Zoo. The devils you and Errol want to save. And now the annihilation of the swans during molting season. I hope this isn't a trend that continues." Dr. Ben added, "And Magda, there are no more pure DNA Tasmanian Aboriginals either." I added, "We're here to reverse some of those trends, I hope." Although man has not directly caused the Tasmanian devil's facial tumors, that I know of, man is going to cure them. Glasses banged on the table and a here went up. Errol and I had looked at this area in some detail on a topographical map when we were considering our options for next year. The sheer volume of fresh water that pours into the harbour through the rivers, combined with the narrow exit result in barometric tides caused at the atmospheric levels. When there is rain in the mountains surrounding the harbour, the tide rises and falls when the atmospheric pressure reverses and results in less rain. In addition, ocean tides can be 2 meters and must flow through Bonnet Bay, which is only 1,200 meters wide at the entrance to Macquarie Inlet. That's an incredible amount of water on the tide and the ebb, twice a day. Why isn't this the perfect site on the planet for a tidal dam? This much power must surely be able to power all of Australia at least. It would give this area of evil a good flushing, I thought. After dinner we sat on the deck listening to the wind and watching the waves lap upon the shore that sheltered Macquarie Inlet from the ocean. It was a clear night with good visibility. We camped out on the deck that night and just watched the shore and the sky above. I think we were waiting for spirits to rise and fly about. None appeared. As we sat on the deck looking toward the land in silence, we had time to contemplate our individual thoughts. I thought about my education and the impact that the discovery of DNA had on it. What would I be interested in if not biology? It seemed more like a destiny than ever before. As a means to transfer the genetic code of life from one cell to another and between successive generations, DNA is the answer. DNA is the critical path I should follow to understand that journey. Identifying the molecule responsible for the heredity of everything is essential if you want to change future generations. I thought back to a conversation I had with Dr. Ben. The first recombinant DNA molecule and the first recombinant DNA plasmid created the first recombinant DNA organism by inserting them into E. coli, and I thought, the first organism created from factory-made DNA, and it was carried by bacteria as a surrogate mother. Dr. Ben added, that process was called bacterial transformation and paved the way for molecular cloning. He told me he hopes this will show the Windhaven crew the path to modifying malaria and dengue vectors. I thought, genetic recombination to create sequences not otherwise available in Mother Nature's, Gaia's or Pachamama's genome palette. Was it just an oversight by all these ladies? Cheesy told us about the field of genomics which links the molecular structure of a gene to the protein or RNA encoded by that segment of DNA with the functional expression of that protein within an organism. Believe it or not, that's a problem for Cheesy's particular set of skills. Data is being collected in databases like the National Center for Biotechnology Information that provides access to biomedical and genomic information. Then you have the nucleotide database collection, and the basic local alignment search tool, both available online. Cheesy said and added, Ensemble is a bioinformatics project that organizes biological information around the sequences of large genomes. Portable open-source software systems for handling genomes are available. That will be a starting point. All their data is provided without restriction, and the code is freely available in an effort to advance world knowledge and should be reciprocated. I knew bioinformatics was about computer analysis and comparison of genes within and between different species. It linked genetic mutations on an evolutionary scale. Boy oh boy, are we ever going to need Cheesy in a room full of computing power. It's so frickin' good to be independently wealthy. Genetic systems analysis, evolutionary genetics, human disease modeling, so many opportunities in the field. It must have been like that in the 1980s during the rise of the microcomputer. That would make Cheesy Bill Gates, writing the code to change the world. Bill couldn't resist keeping his code for himself, karma be damned, reincarnate him as Dung Beetle. Cheesy is no Bill Gates and we aren't IBM, the unwitting victim. Most of us woke on the deck that morning to a beautiful sunrise as we sailed away from Macquarie Harbour on our way south to Hobart. It was an overcast day and we only had a couple days left of our ocean adventure as we sailed closer to Hobart. My dad let me know I could tell Errol we would be at the Hobart Princess Elizabeth Pier in early afternoon tomorrow. It seemed like we couldn't even get as far as Hobart without running into more prisons. From the early 1800s to the mid-1800s, when penal transportation was abolished, Van Diemen's Land was the primary penal colony for Australia, resulting in a total of 73,000 convicts. The most difficult convicts received a cold welcome at Port Arthur, while women convicts were sent to one of 5 women's workhouse prisons. We spent much of the day looking for whales, with several confirmed sightings and 1,000 possible sightings, including some whales that are probably having breakfast in Siberia and a few I think Cheesy made up. Sandy always found an opportunity to interject an Indian story or assorted gods and goddesses, while Dr. Ben was curious about almost everything we came across and buzzed around like a bee. Cheesy started calling him Dr. Benby. Later in the afternoon we pulled out the fishing equipment and went shopping for dinner. It wasn't long before Eric picked up an Atlantic salmon on the trolling line. The Eastern Dragon doesn't stop for these kind of fishing opportunities, so Eric had a fight on his hands. 10 minutes or so later he dragged it up on the deck and it was away to the galley for cleaning. Krista latched into a nice-sized rainbow trout that took as much cheering from the crowd as resistance from the fish for her to pull it in. After dinner we sat on the deck again. Magda thought that as we turn across the bottom of Tasmania to head towards Hobart that we might catch sight of a blue or a southern right whale. The moon was almost full, and the sky was clear and bright. A few clouds scattered around, but they moved very slowly if at all. This is the calm seas they tell you about. I was expecting the turn would be more dramatic, but that's what makes a race. Captain Wes told us. The Duchess sat with us that last night on the boat. She was a spiritual person by nature, having been brought up in the southern United States, so she had developed a strong bond with these girls who could predict the future and read the mystical signs. In fact, the Duchess invited Magda and Krista to come and stay with her on the island for a month anytime they wanted. She promised to show them a good time in Hong Kong. Sandy said, "Quiet, listen." And everyone instantly went silent. They waited. Then they heard the long low drone of a very large whale, and everyone jumped with joy. It was audible on the night wind, but very difficult to see across to the horizon. Everyone was scanning for it when Eric came out from his electronics and pointed to a spot in the distance. It was amazing how far the sound traveled. Captain Wes informed us, under no circumstances can we alter course and try to get closer to the whale. That's strictly forbidden. However, if the whale becomes curious of us, it may choose that option for itself. Magda told us, whales use sounds to communicate so much more information than we do. Communication is more important to a whale than it is to us. Other senses are of less effectiveness in water. Sight is less because of the particulate in the water and the way the ocean scatters light. Smell is hampered because molecules diffuse more slowly in water than in air. Isn't that right, science boys? Dr. Ben added, the speed of sound is roughly 4 times greater in water than it is in the atmosphere at sea level. The song of the humpback whale may just seem like patterns of regular sounds, but to the male humpback whales, they're communicating their fitness to females encoded in the information. Magda told us, in fact, the way the male creates the sound is by sending it down a resonating tube that's the length of his body. It then comes up the other side before being projected out. It's possible that this somehow encodes his genetic information into the song. That should get you science boys hot and bothered. Whales are being harmed by ambient noise in the world's oceans caused by ships, sonar, and marine seismic surveys, to mention just a few sources. Mother Nature throws down the odd glacial mountain into the ocean, sends her fury up through a mountain pipe through a volcano, or just stomps her feet in rage with an earthquake, but when she does, she starts pendulums swinging everywhere. All the mass beachings around the world must have noise or vibration at their core. This is becoming a noisy world for many animals. Unfortunately, this time the whale didn't choose the option of swimming towards us, and we parted company. Magda, perhaps the whale didn't know you were aboard, I said, and she replied, he knew. The wink was in the message. The rest of the journey along the bottom of Tasmania was quiet. Overcast and a slight drizzle kept everything moister than we wanted it to be. Although we kept our eyes peeled, there weren't any more sightings of note. We arrived in Hobart at the pier to see Errol, Mary, and Uncle Artis standing in the drizzle waiting for us. Mary and Errol were waving their arms so hard I thought their hands were going to fly off. We could have rented them out to stand in front of an appliance store having a hot sale. It was bittersweet having to say goodbye to dear old Dad and the Duchess because we had just had such a wonderful journey thanks to them and began to make connections. I let him know that I was grateful for the present and that I thought the Duchess was too good a catch to throw back. She now has the cosmic protection of the girls, so I'd be careful if I were you. Cheesy can tell you, can't you? To which Cheesy responded, oh yeah, they have some tricks and you've only met 2/3 of them. Uncle Artis took our luggage and packages in the back of his truck, and everyone piled into the 2 Land Rovers that he had purchased for Errol and me. They weren't the most beautiful vehicles on the island, but Errol assured me I wouldn't find any in better working condition than these, thanks to Uncle Artis. On the way to their house, he told me Uncle Artis picked up these vehicles and a lot of camping equipment because many of our trips will be into remote areas to collect first-hand samples or do research. I guess the largest trees don't grow in downtown Hobart, I said, and there probably isn't a big population of devils there either. I've been looking into our PhD opportunities for the fall and also places we might want to visit on our first trip to acquaint you with the terrain and provide an exciting trip for your friends. You're going to have to narrow your choices soon. I saw some of the notes you sent me. Can we do a full-time research program along with the business? It could drag on for 6 or 7 years and that might be more than I want to invest. I'm anxious to get on with DNA research and we have Cheesy coming to stay also, I hope. The computer analysis of DNA is going to be critical to everything we do in the future and we won't find a better person than Cheesy, I said. A PhD has supervised research and professional development conducted over 3 to 4 years or 6 to 8 years. Then we give a thesis examined by 2 external examiners. I was hoping we could find a job for my mother and part of her job would be filing our reports online with the uni. We keep doing the work we want to do and we get our PhDs when we get them. They don't make us any smarter. The letters somehow prove to people who don't know diddly squat that we're smarter than they are and they should listen to us. Errol said, and that made me laugh. Okay, that sounds good. Have you straightened out the funds for school? I asked him and he replied, Tassies get a UD $20,000, $30,000 toward their fees, mate. They put that against the tuition fee of $40,000 AUD that both you and I are required to pay. For the last $10,000, my mom applied for scholarships until she got the 2 numbers spot on. The house was in a small survey in Hobart just across the River Derwent from the pier. It took us about 20 minutes to drive along the river through the botanical gardens, across the bridge and down Rosny Hill Road. There was a mall on the left we passed and then headed down Drummond to Waverley, the street where they lived. We arrived at a house set up on a hill, backing onto a forest. The house and driveway were large enough to accommodate all the vehicles and their contents. We'll stay here a few days while we plan the trip and grab any supplies we're gonna need. My mom is anxious to show your friends around Hobart. Mary was out of the truck first, followed closely behind by Uncle Artis. Just leave your bags, Artis will bring them in. I'll show you to your rooms and you can freshen up before we have a cuppa, she announced. We followed her instructions and went up the stairs to a large veranda covered by an awning to shield you from the midday sun. Errol opened the front door and announced, come on in and make yourselves to home. As he went in and began dropping bags on tables and sofas around the room. The front room was massive and had windows all across the front to give exposure to the river traffic visible over the veranda. The kitchen was open concept to the entire room with a large table in front of the window with at least a dozen chairs around it. Several sofas were located about the room and bookshelves were crammed with books, charts, maps, and all kinds of paraphernalia. The house felt very homey and comfortable, but I couldn't help thinking what Mary would say to Sandy's dining room, let alone Castle Sel Tradit. All the bedrooms and facilities were at the back of the house. Even though this was not a boat, we had the same amount of room in our personal accommodations with this bigger crowd. Cheesy and I, Dr. Benby and Sandy and the girls. I learned later that Errol had the whole basement as his bedroom and it was massive. Although Mary and Uncle Artis had moved to this house while Errol was at Oxford, they carted and toted every item he had in the previous house and arranged it exactly, or better, than it was. They obviously felt he was coming back home to stay with them. When I came back to the kitchen, Errol and Cheesy were having a cup of tea with some of Mary's baked goods that lined the counters and stove. I took a cup and a couple slices of cake before sitting down to join the conversation, which was focused on the Tasmanian devil and its plight. The Tasmanian devil is a marsupial animal native to Australia, where it doesn't exist in the wild anymore, and in Tasmania where its pendulum might be past its pivot already. Marsupials are extremely rare anywhere else in the world, but they've been here since the days of Pangaea. Marsupials raise their young in pouches and that makes them different basically. Errol said and added, the devil facial tumor disease, DFTD, is an aggressive non-viral clonally transmissible cancer that affects devils. What's that in English? Cheesy asked as the rest of the crew joined us for tea and cakes. Clonally means the disease can be passed by contact and it doesn't require a virus, I said. A transmissible cancer is a cancer cell or cluster of cancer cells that can be transferred between individuals without the involvement of an infectious agent, such as an oncovirus. Transmission of cancer between humans is extremely rare. The evolution of transmissible cancer has occurred naturally in just a few animal species. Besides the devils, it is known to occur in dogs, Syrian hamsters, and some soft-shell clams. The cancers have a relatively stable genome, Errol finished. Can you imagine humans passing cancers that way? It would spread so fast in places like Africa, Dr. Ben noted, and Sandy added, I would fear for India. It was first described 20 years ago and affected high-density populations which suffered up to 100% mortality in just a year to a year and a half. Can you imagine if SARS or the coronavirus had moved that fast, or was that viral? Errol asked us. In those 20 years, DFTD wiped out 95% of all affected devil populations. How do they spread the disease, Errol? Are they scratching and biting each other all the time? Magda asked. Oh yeah, these little buggers scrap every chance they get, from scrapping over food, shoving for the best sleeping position, or mating, which can be fatal. If the female is put with a male too soon, the male will ferociously bite her before they get a chance to mate. And everyone shuddered and groaned. Errol went on to say, biting, particularly when canine teeth come into direct contact with the diseased cells, and really spreads the cancer. At that point everyone thought he was doing it for effect and started throwing things at him. No, he said, other methods include the ingestion of infected carcasses and the sharing of food, both of which involve an allogeneic transfer of cells between unrelated individuals. The animals most likely to become infected are the fittest devil individuals. Sorry, Professor Darwin. Aside from all of this gory guts and blood stuff, what are they currently doing to fight this? Magda asked. Wild Tasmanian devil populations are being monitored to track the spread of the disease and to identify changes in disease prevalence. Field monitoring involves trapping devils within a defined area to check for the presence of the disease and determine the number of affected animals. The same area is visited repeatedly to characterize the spread of the disease over time. That doesn't sound like lightning response, but if diseases like these attack humans, or at least things that matter to humans, time will probably not be on their side. Dr. Ben added, it's hard to be prepared for all possibilities when in your ignorance you're only aware of half of them. Short-term effects of the disease in an area can be severe. Long-term monitoring will be essential to assess whether these effects remain and whether populations can recover. Field workers are also testing the effectiveness of trapping and removing diseased devils. Is it possible to catch them all and remove them? At best that would slow down the disease a little, Krista added. The thought was it would allow devils to survive beyond juvenile years and therefore have an opportunity to breed. It seemed like a better program than culling them. Mary jumped in at that point and told Errol, it's time for you to clear out of my way so I can get the dinner on the table. You know Uncle Artis needs his dinner on the table by 6 o'clock. She said, but it was just to get Errol to clear out, so she had room to work. This was a big dinner for Mary. She had spent days getting ready. Errol took us on a tour of the house and the neighborhood before dinner. He was giving cheesy and either sales pitch on the great things Tasmania had to offer, as any true son of Tasmania would. In reality, it was the amazing animals and fauna that made Tasmania so unique in the world, but I had no idea how poorly humans had treated this island's inhabitants and neighbors. It seems nothing is done by halves in Tasmania. Kill all the whales, all the swans, all the tigers, all the devils, and even the people. Not on my watch, Errol proclaimed. And we returned to the kitchen just in time to see Uncle Artis cutting the roast. I hope you like the items I've prepared for you tonight. I tried to get some Tasmanian specialties to give you a taste, but if you just want roast beef, we have lots of that. Mary informed us, and Uncle Artis said, I'll start with the beef, Mary. Errol and Mary explained the dishes to us as we served ourselves portions of everything. What's this, Mary? Magda asked as she scooped out a pastry-covered dish onto her plate. That's a scallop pie, sweetie. We pull great huge white scallops from the cold clear water here. That gives the scallops a rich buttery taste like nowhere else in the world. They're my personal favorite. Errol informed us, you should eat your fill of fresh oysters. I spent all morning shucking them. And he passed the tray over to Krista, who was motioning for them. I love oysters and seafood in general. I don't think any Sel Tradit was a vegetarian. Mary told us, the Flinders Island lamb is from the island of the same name. The meat pies are a Tassie favorite and baked all over the island. We use only Cape Grim beef mixed with savory spices and wrapped in pastry. I hope you like these because I made tons of them and froze them for your trip. They're a really handy snack when you're in the bush, aren't they, Artis? Tassie is famous for butter and cream too, Uncle Artis contributed. And Uncle Artis has a weakness for the fudge and truffles they make in the specialty chocolate shops in Hobart. If you ever want to get on Uncle Artis' good side, slip him a bar of fudge or box of truffles. They won't sell to him. Mom has his picture posted behind the counter. Errol said, and we all laughed. I heard about some really good honey that comes from Tasmania. The unique flora and fauna create some very unique flavors in honey. Magda said, and Mary replied, "Oh yes, the leatherwood honey from the Cradle Mountains and Blue Hills honey from the Tarkine. My mother told me when I was young that the Blue Hills honey had magical powers. The bees are highly selective of the flowers they choose, and this gives the honey a chemical that leaves you with a slightly euphoric feeling. Many people swear by it for aches and pains. They even use it daily in their tea." Dr. Ben noted, "That's interesting. I'd like to take a sample of that honey home and run it through the spectrograph. It's quite possible there is a transfer of a protein here, just as we see with the malaria and dengue we study every day. It might be just a straight transfer through the pollen. I think there are lots of mysteries on this island, Errol. Try some wasabi cheese, that's no mystery." And everyone laughed. We enjoyed the dinner Mary made for us and clearly saw the effort and care she had put into it on our behalf. The table was cleared and Errol unrolled a large topographical map of Tasmania on top of it. "I know you want this first trip to be primarily for everyone to see Tasmania rather than strictly business, but we can see some places that we may want to go back to later or might be important for some of the PhD programs we might want to look into. Some of the crew want to see whales," I said, and I looked at Magda, which made everyone laugh because by now everyone knew she was totally obsessed with whales. Frederick Henry Bay and Great Oyster Bay on the east coast are both supposed to be excellent vantage points according to my dad's crew. "Oh, yeah. Frederick Henry Bay is pretty easy to get to. You can take the 52A bus tonight. It's just off downtown Hobart in Tiger Head Bay. Uncle Artis told us. Can we go later tonight?" Krista and Magda both asked. "If we go up the east coast, we should hit Spring Bay and Possa Bay, which are both decent for spotting the occasional large blue. Then further up is Low Bay and Grindstone Bay. The big fellas sometimes get lured in close there and they tend to breach a lot in that section of the coast," Uncle Artis told us. He was beginning to sound like Captain Ahab. Then there's Mayfield Bay a little further north. Great Oyster Bay is north of Maria Island. It's protected by a series of islands that shelter it from the ocean. That's probably why it's such a good place. They lounge for a day or two before continuing up to the shark-infested reef area in Australia. Errol said, "We will definitely arrange for 2 or 3 days with access to that bay. We can set up camp in a few places on the coast and take day trips into the interior. Uncle Artis has a brother we will be staying with for a bit as well." Uncle Artis added, "I want to look for a good location for your research station. It would help if I knew the general area you were looking at." Errol replied, "That may be difficult with 9 different subtypes of devil DNA to determine. We could be traveling all over the island. On this trip we will be traveling a path that approximates the Devil Extinction Trail and ending at Sanctuary. Can we look for some Tasmanian tigers too?" Krista asked, and Dr. Ben added, "I'd be interested in that." Which was not much of a surprise to anyone, including Mary, who had mentioned the obvious interest to Errol. "Now you've done it, young lady," Mary said, and Errol added, "Uncle Artis and a few of the old fellas have been known to go walkabout for a week on the Thylacines Trail." "Old fellas my ass. It ain't coffee shops and libraries we go looking for, in. If you tracked the strict bugger into the places we go you wouldn't be carrying a coffee with you, mate," he said in defense of himself. "What's the chance there are still tigers here, do you think? When was the last time a tiger seen?" asked Magda. "Popular belief, or at least official government belief, is that they went extinct about 30 years ago. Officially Benji, the last tiger, died in the Hobart Zoo in 1936, but almost everyone believes tigers could still persist in the most remote parts of the island. My mate Barry retired from the University of Tasmania, where he collected more than 1,200 records of sightings and physical evidence from the last 100 years. They used the information to figure out when the tiger was likely to have perished. Do you remember any of the sightings or where they were, Uncle Artis?" Krista asked. "I remember just last year a footprint spotted on a walk up to Sleeping Beauty Mountain in the southeast. The footprint would be recognizable as a tiger if it was fair dinkum." And everyone chuckled, and Cheesy asked, "What's fair dinkum?" To which Errol replied, "Real or genuine." Errol added, "Just last summer a government plant biologist saw what she believed to be a Thylacinus cynocephalus, or thylacine, from about 30 meters away. Maybe I can find out where that was. 2 or 3 years ago 3 bike riders said they saw a thylacine crossing the road in front of them. In that region they have lots of paddymelons and wallabies. Their favored prey could support them in small populations." "What's a paddymelon?" Dr. Ben asked, and Errol told us it was a small, chunky kangaroo-like marsupial of the genus Thylagale. "Cute little buggers." Then Magda added, "Let's not give up hope, science boys. Species have been rediscovered recently, including the coelacanth, the Wollemi pine, the mountain pygmy possum and the solenodon. I think it's really important to maintain that frame of mind. If you're on the edge, we're coming to help you." Uncle Albus told us, The most well-known and credible thylacine sighting came on a rainy night about 40 years ago by a park ranger named of Hans Narding. Hans was sleeping in his vehicle and woke to find one right in front of him. And Dr. Ben said, "Oh my God, I think I would have crapped myself." Quote. Hans sat there watching the tiger for 3 minutes and was unable to take a photograph. He said, and everyone gasped the ahs and ohs of disapproval. He was hands-free. Cheesy piped in. Because Narding was a wildlife expert, he couldn't have been mistaken. It was either fair dinkum, or a lie, and I don't see any benefit for a lie, so I chose to believe it was true. Cheesy asked Errol, "Did you pick up any camera traps for the trip?" To which Errol replied, "No, but that's a great idea. Let's go in the morning and get some." How did this happen, Errol? How was it possible to get the last one both here and in Australia? Magda asked. The thylacine was extinct everywhere but Tasmania about 2,000 years ago. There were about 5,000 thylacines in Tasmania at the time of European settlement. I know it seems that we measure the number of things by how many there were when the Europeans came, but that's a significant event, I'm sure. And yes, I know we're Europeans by DNA, but the day the DNA sprouted in Tasmania it began to evolve. Errol said in defense of himself, which is always an awkward way to feel when you think you have to apologize for generations and events you were not party to. He made his point and the rest of us understood. Thylacine roughly translates in Greek through Latin as dog-headed pouched one. Errol continued, at which point Cheesy jumped in. I had more than one professor the name would have suited. And he got his laugh. They are, or were, the world's largest marsupial carnivores, and despite their fierce reputation, they were semi-nocturnal and quite shy, avoiding contact with humans. Fossilized remains have been found in Papua New Guinea, throughout the Australian mainland and Tasmania. He added. But why did people go after them to kill them? They weren't attacking cities or people, Magda asked. They were seen as a threat to livestock like sheep and cattle. Despite evidence that feral dogs and widespread mismanagement were responsible for the majority of stock losses, the thylacine became an easy scapegoat and was hated and feared by the Tasmanian public. As early as 1830, bounty systems for the thylacine were established. Farm owners pooled money to pay for skins, and in 1888, the Tasmanian government also introduced a bounty of £1 per full-grown animal and 10 shillings per juvenile animal destroyed. Uncle Artis told us. The program went on for 20 years with more than 2,000 bounties. Estimates say at least 3,500 thylacines were killed by human hunting. Competing species of wild dogs, foreign diseases like mange, and habitat destruction all kicked this little fella's butt. And swung his pendulum, I thought. But not past the pivot. We have to find one. This species does not have to be extinct. Let's make a difference and find one. Magda said, and Krista agreed with her vehemently. You're sitting with one doctor, 2 future doctors and a computer genius who can make that happen in the next few years whether we find one or not. To which Dr. Ben, Errol, Cheesy and myself gave a thump on the table which conveyed a commitment to do it. Everyone else thumped the table and Magda announced, "Count the science boys in Krista." With that, Uncle Artis announced he was loading up the truck to go down to the bridge on the river to do some whale watching, and was there anyone who wanted to go with him. Of course, he knew the girls were chomping at the bit to go. Mary told them, "The bag by the door has the coffee and sandwiches, make sure you don't forget them." That was the way Mary said things. She would never say, "Remember," she would always say, "Don't forget." It seemed that by phrasing it that way she made it your obligation, and damn it, you better not forget. Errol and I stayed behind to finalize the details for the trip because everyone had decided to leave tomorrow and get on with the tiger and devil hunt. The total trip Errol had planned was almost 1,300 kilometers over the next 2 weeks, so campsites had to be planned and resources scoped out. Safety concerns were paramount to me, especially where snake bites were concerned. Uncle Artis is trained in first aid and carries all kinds of tucker to deal with snake bite. Compression bandages are the key here, mate. We won't have any antivenom, but we'll have access to medical facilities at all times. Let's make sure cell phones are charged and that we check for access on a regular basis. It may be possible for search and rescue to find us by GPS before we could get to them. Australians love taking to the air in emergencies, that's why we have the flying doctor service. By the way, I told Mom that you agreed to the plan of bringing her on board and she was overjoyed. She will be able to retire from the cannery and get a small pension for a nest egg. Thanks, mate. We'll need her to look after us if we're going to change the world, my friend. Mom tells me our schedule will be a draft research plan submitted at 3-month intervals, which is equivalent to full-time enrollment. Confirmation at 12 months and annual reviews of progress at 24 and 36 months. Then thesis submission no later than 48 months. How does that sound? Does it fit your master plan? To which I replied, indeed it does. It was late when the group returned from whale watching, but they were full of exuberance. They had seen so many things swinging in the water they lost count. There were whales of every description as well as dolphins and several unidentified sea monsters. Cheesy even claimed to see Nessie. After a hot cup of tea and some of Mary's cakes, everyone was off to bed in anticipation of an early start. Most of our gear could be left here in order to reduce the burden of what we were taking on the trip. Mary's friend Mavis had 2 grandsons that ran an ecotourism business, and Mary hired them to run our camp for us while we explored Tasmania. Mavis and her husband Gregory, an Aboriginal couple, had worked for Mary's father Reverend Jim when she was young. Reverend Jim was a Presbyterian minister in Hobart for more than 40 years, and during that time Mavis and Gregory managed the manse for him. Mary's mother had died when she was very young, so she had to be the lady of the house for the Reverend. Mavis told her that Travis and Timor ran their environmental wilderness tour business more like a bed and breakfast in the wilderness. She and Gregory had 2 daughters which both left Tasmania to marry a couple Australian Aborigines and travel to Arnhem Land to live in an Aboriginal town. Both daughters had since died, and Mavis blamed it on alcohol abuse. Travis and Timor were on time bright and early that morning. It was a beautiful day to set off, nice and sunny but with a cool breeze. The 2 Land Rovers were packed, as was Uncle Art's truck and Travis and Timor's 4x4, which carried sporting, fishing, and other equipment. Our first stop was Great Oyster Bay just north of Maria Island. Uncle Art's brother Arthur lived in a house on 9 Mile Beach. The plan was to camp on his property for a couple days watching whales, visiting the local sites, and enjoying one of the best beaches in the southern hemisphere. We took the A3 to Oxford Beach, where Maria Island forms a rather large, sheltered inlet with the mainland. Magda had read that this was a place where whales tend to congregate, so the girls had their eyes peeled as we crossed the bridge, and in fact, any time we were in sight of water they were on high alert. We continued on the A3, or the Tasman Hoy as it was called locally, north to the little Swamport area rather than continue onto the coast and then turn north. Mayfield Beach gave us a grand vista view of Great Oyster Bay, so we stopped and enjoyed some lunch before continuing north through lush and bountiful farmland to the end of the bay. The town of Swansea was ideally located among the farmland, hills, and against the ocean bay, which was protected by the Freycinet Peninsula from the ocean. Dolphin Sands, located at the end of the bay, lined 9 Mile Beach, the bay's northern limit. Beyond that, at the end of Freycinet Peninsula, was Schouten Island. They formed the outer arm of the bay. Magda said it was like they had their arm around the mother whales and their babies protecting them while they were in the cove. Uncle Arthur's property was almost at the end of the beach near the conservation area. He was standing in front of his house with a beer in his hand and a slab on the ground beside him. "Good day. Get a cold beer down your neck," he shouted as we drove up and raised his hand in the air. Uncle Arthur was in the Australian Army for most of his adult life until he retired a couple of years ago. Most of his career was in search and rescue in the top end from his home in Darwin, where he was a helicopter pilot. Travis and Timor began a sweep of the property to look for any dangerous snakes before they set up camp. Uncle Arthur had 2 extra rooms, of which one was assigned to Magda and Krista, while Dr. Ben and Sandy had the other. We made Sandy promise to tell us a Hindu story at the campfire tonight, and he agreed and said he would pick a doozy, a new word he learned from Timor. Once introductions were made all around, we began setting up camp and emptying the Land Rovers. More than half the first slab of beer had been consumed in the process, so Uncle Arthur went to the shed to get another one. The tents were set up on either side and well back from a huge fire pit. Travis put a large square mesh of steel on top of one half of the fire to use as a barbie, and a huge pot was placed on the other side to be used for the boil. Uncles Artis and Arthur began pulling out shellfish from the shed in bins, including some of the biggest lobsters I'd ever seen. Timor called the big shrimp yabbies, and said they were great wilderness tucker, but I'm sure these were saltwater shrimp, not freshwater. While the uncles got the barbie underway, Travis and Timor gave us a talk on which animals we had to watch out for while in Tasmania. Let's start with the snakes. That's usually what tourists are most afraid of in Australia. On the mainland, there are almost 100 snakes that can kill you and half a dozen of the most venomous critters on the planet. But this is Tasmania. Being cut off from the mainland means we have a different variety of animals, including snakes. Travis told us. Timor added, "If, and when, we come across these fellas, I will catch them and show them to you. Don't approach them, or my grandmother says Mary will have my balls." And everyone laughed. The land snakes here are led by the tiger snake, Notechus scutatus, but we also have the lowland copperhead, Australaps superbus, and the white-lipped snake, Drysdalia coronoides. That's it. Only 3 in species, but we make up for that in quantity. But the laugh was not quite as loud as he was expecting, and a couple of coughs came in at the end. Tiger snakes, despite their name, do not have stripes, and all of these snakes can vary in color, so describing them to you is futile. You can look them up on the internet, but again, patterns and colors will vary. The most reliable way to tell is by the middle head scale width, but don't get that close. Basically, any snake you come across, big or small, head the other way. Travis instructed us. Tamor added, snakes aren't particularly fast here. Paddle to the metal is the same speed as a fat fella heading to the buffet. They're great swimmers though. They go like buggers in the water after eels, fish or frogs. I could tell Tamor and Cheesy were going to get along well, they both had the same sense of humor. Snakes depend on external sources of heat to raise their body temperature enough to become active or digest food, which means you may come across them sunning themselves on rocks. Later when it gets hot, they'll be under those same rocks. Travis told us. Tiger snakes and lowland copperheads can both be active on warm nights, so carry a torch when going walkabout at night. Dr. Ben added, did you know that venom is highly modified saliva, and in some species of snakes it's crucial to digestion? Venom isn't designed specifically to kill people, however even dead snakes can be dangerous, because venom can crystallize within the fang of a dead snake and remain potent for years. OMG, even a stuffed cobra? Sandy asked, to which Dr. Ben replied, yes, the snake in the actual case I was referring to was a cobra which had been stuffed almost 3 years prior. A freshly dead snake would have venom in its fang canals for sure. In all of Australia, over the last 10 years, there have been 4 deaths from just over 100 confirmed envenomations. Tiger snake venom possess potent neurotoxins, coagulants, hemolysins, and mycotoxins. Travis told us. What does it feel like if you get bit? Krista asked, and Travis told her, localized pain in the foot and neck region, tingling, numbness, and sweating, followed by a fairly rapid onset of breathing difficulties and paralysis. Tamor said, the old fellas used to say, don't treat a tiger bite, then your chance is sun and moon, which to them meant 50-50. Dr. Ben noted, if someone does get bit in Africa, we use the pressure immobilization method to inhibit the flow of venom through the lymphatic system. Broad, thick bandages are applied over the bite, then down and back along the limb to the armpit or groin. The affected limb is then immobilized with a splint. Travis confirmed, that's right Dr. Ben, and here identification of the venom is not necessary because the same antivenom is used to treat all Tasmanian snakes bites. The availability of antivenom has greatly reduced the incidence of fatal tiger snake bites. The venom of lowland copperhead contains postsynaptic neurotoxins. Only 1 fatality has been recorded due to that snake. Dr. Ben added, postsynaptic neurotoxins are known as alpha neurotoxins and bind to the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, resulting in the prevention of nerve transmission, leading to death from asphyxiation. And everyone looked at him like he had just spoken a foreign language. He concluded, what? I like to know my enemy. Errol jumped in, presynaptic neurotoxins have been used for the treatment of migraine headaches and cerebral palsy. Even snakes have something to contribute to man. But think about it, a venom that can target neurotoxin release could have big impact, especially if we knew more about the brain. Snakes don't have ears and can't hear sounds, so walk around like you're an elephant. Sandy advised. And remember, babies are just as dangerous as their parents. Believe me, we live with snakes in India. In the category of sea snakes, we have the ocellated and the yellow-bellied sea snakes predominantly. Sea snakes are most unlikely to bite you unless you sit on them. However, if you do sit on one and get bit in the ass, the venom is highly potent, like all sea snakes. Yellow-bellied sea snake venom contains several different neurotoxins and 2 other isotoxins. And nobody is going to suck the venom out, Travis informed us. The subcutaneous LD50 of the venom is 0.067 mg per kilogram, and the venom yield per bite is 1.0 to 4.0 mg according to the internet. Dr. Ben added, what is LD50, Dr. Benby? Cheesy asked, and he replied, LD50 is the median lethal dose of something. So, all you need is 0.067 and a bite can be up to 4.000. Oh, you don't need artificial intelligence to know you're dead many times over. Quote. What does it feel like? Krista asked, and Cheesy jumped in, to be dead. Don't you know? And she smacked him, but he got the laugh he was after. Sea snake venom can cause damage to skeletal muscle with consequent myoglobinuria, neuromuscular paralysis or direct renal damage. Dr. Ben read from his screen. There is antivenom for sea snake, but if it's not available, tiger snake or polyvalent antivenom is used. No deaths have been recorded from sea snake bites in Australian waters. Uncle Arthur told us. We rescued tons of fellas in the top end that had snake bite or got bit waitin' for rescue. Food's up. Uncle Artis yelled, and we all headed for the cold slab Uncle Arthur just set out before helping ourselves to lobsters and shrimp. The sun was just starting to set as we brought our food around the fire. Magda yelled, "Look, whales!" And she pointed out to the bay where several whales were swimming alongside each other and further out several others were breaching. There must have been a dozen whales involved and they continued to frolic until the sun went down. Magda and Krista brought out their instruments and played several songs for us. Then Timur and Travis gave us a reggae set. They told us they grew up in Arnhem Land close to where Kakadu National Park is now. When they were young, they liked to go out with the old fellas and learn the tricks of survival as well as their culture and art. As the old fellas died, no one was replacing them. Alcohol was everywhere and people didn't need to know about survival or even bush tucker, just how to collect their money. They should have kept their culture and art. After their mother died, they left Arnhem Land and drifted to Cairns where they became surfers. Timur won a couple of cash events, but for Travis, the big wave never came, as Timur told us. Travis did, however, earn some cash playing sets in the bars and nightclubs of the tourist area. Eventually they tired of the surfing and the bar scene and came home to Tasmania to live with their grandparents, Mavis and Gregory, to see if they could rekindle their family feelings. "Do you think the whales have gone, Magda?" Travis asked. "I don't know, perhaps back out to the ocean. They're mammals, so they must come up for air at some point. I don't know how long they can stay down. It depends on the species, I guess." Travis went to his truck and returned with a hydrophone, an underwater listening device. He hooked it up to his laptop and then went to the water and placed a silver disc below the water level but suspended from the bottom. The whale produces sound waves that move like ripples. Their speed decreases with increasing depth as the temperature drops, causing the sound waves to refract downward. Dr. Ben added, "They emit low-frequency sound waves like rolling hills on an oscilloscope, and in that form, they can travel extreme distances in water without losing energy. In fact, researchers have found they can travel more than 10,000 miles in some levels of the ocean." Magda said, "There are so many different sounds that whales can make and so many different types of whales as well as other sea mammals. When I listen to the wolves at home, I know their language. I want to learn the whale language so I can understand them. Imagine sitting on the edge of the ocean in the moonlight listening to whales talking to you from hundreds of miles away. It's cosmic or mystical, I don't know." Dr. Ben informed us, "I know to make its clicking sounds, a whale must force air through the right nasal passage to the monkey lips, which clap shut." And everyone laughed, but he continued, "No, it's true. The resulting click bounces off one air-filled sac and travels back through the spermaceti organ to another sac nestled against the skull. It's an incredibly complex sound when it's packaged for delivery. We have no idea what the big fella is saying." Sandy asked, "What noise does an orca make?" Travis replied, "Orca sounds range from about 0.1 kHz to about 40 kHz. They produce pulsed sounds and clicks at rates of up to 5,000 per second. You'll recognize them because they sound like screams. And if they don't, they will likely produce a scream from something else, you can count on it. Much to the chagrin of everyone." He continued, "All blue whale calls are between 10 and 40 Hz, and the lowest frequency sound a human can typically perceive is 20 Hz. Blue whale calls last between 10 and 30 seconds. Sandy, tell us the story like you promised." "You owe us one," Magda asked, and Krista added her encouragement. "Hey, he owes us, with the ones sleeping outside," Cheesy noted. "But you can listen as my special guests." "We could all do with one of your cosmic yarns, Sandy," Cheesy added while deflecting some mock aggression from the girls. "Knew a bunch o' Indian Army guys up north. Them fellas had some wild tales, 'bout shrines, temples and even space aliens," Uncle Arthur said. "I don't doubt it, Arthur," Sandy said. "I'm going to tell you about the Ramayana, which has all that and more. It's one of two major Sanskrit epics of ancient India, the other being the Mahabharata. The Ramayana was credited to the Maharishi Valmiki, who narrates the life of Rama, a legendary prince of Ayodhya city in the kingdom of Kosala. Would Sage Valmiki have been a contemporary of Sage Bregu, the subject of the document we found in Romania last year?" I asked. "Yes, he would, but perhaps not contemporary in timeline. This epic follows Rama's 14-year exile by his father King Dasharatha to the forest. He paused to let everyone get a cold one from the slab and find their seat around the fire. The girls snuggled together in a sleeping bag next to the fire as the temperature dropped a bit. The Ramayana has nearly 24,000 verses, divided into 7 kandas or chapters. The first and last being later additions. I will need to paraphrase a bit. Updating religious documents for modern times can't be seen as all bad, can it?" Cheesy asked, and Sandy chuckled. The Ramayana belongs to the genre of itihasa, or incidents that happened during the lifetime of the narrator, rather than being purafta or historic to the writer. Therefore, we can assume Maharishi Valmiki was present in the day when the Ramayana occurred. We may also consider it fact. The events took place during a period known as Treta Yuga. In the timeline known as the Yugas, you can consider a period perhaps 3 million years ago. That could indicate a wide range of time. In the Treta Yuga, even mortal humans lived 500 years. How did it all happen, Sandy? I asked. Brahma was considered to be the creator, God within the Trimurti, the trinity of supreme divinity which included Vishnu and Shiva. He creates everything but neither preserves nor destroys anything. Those are Vishnu and Shiva's jobs respectively. One such job for Vishnu was to deal with a demon who was causing problems for the sages in the mortal realm. They were being prevented from performing their sacrifices or conducting their yajnas as fire ceremonies were known. Ravana, a Rakshasa, and his brothers performed penance at Gokana for several years to please Brahma to try to earn a boon. Ravana went so far as to sacrifice each of his heads in the holy fire to please the Creator. Sandy told us. How many did he have? Magda asked, astonished. He continued, right before he was about to chop off his 10th head, Brahma appeared to grant him a boon. Ravana asked for the boon of immortality, but Brahma said that was not possible as all that is born must perish. Ravana tweaked his wish which Brahma said he could only be killed by a mortal. Brahma initially granted Ravana boons that made him so powerful that no one could kill him. That forced Brahma to ask Vishnu for help in defeating Ravana when Ravana began to use his powers for evil. Why was Brahma taking an interest in Ravana? Krista asked. Sandy continued, Brahma created his children from his mind and thus, they were referred to as Manasaputra. On earth, Ravana's lineage could be traced back to the mighty Lord Brahma. Ravana's grandfather was Sage Palastya, one of the 10 mind-born sons of Brahma. That made Ravana the great-grandson of Brahma. Why was Ravana so bad? I asked. The demon king Sumali once caught a glimpse of Kubera, the son of Sage Vishrava. He was so taken by him that he instructed his daughter to obtain sons through Vishrava. Obeying her father's command, she made the request of Sage Vishrava who obliged but warned her one would be bad because she had approached him at the wrong hour of the day. That's how Ravana came to be half Asura and half Brahman, but all bad. So, Vishnu agreed to be reborn on earth as an avatar or reincarnation of himself in the form of Rama, as you will see. According to the Ramayana, Rama is the 7th avatar of Vishnu, while his brothers Lakshmana, Bharata and Shatrana were avatars of Shishanaga, Panchayanya, and the Sudarshana Chakra respectively. Vishnu's weapons, of course. The Balakanda or first chapter of Valmiki's Ramayana details stories of Rama's childhood as a prince under King Dasharatha of Ayodhya. Before we get there, let's look at the events that led to his birth in this unique situation. King Dasharatha had 3 wives, Kaushalya, Kaikeyi and Sumitra. However, he didn't have a son and in his desire to create an heir, he decided to perform a fire sacrifice known as a Putrakamashti Yajna. What does that involve, Sandy? I love hearing about these yajnas, Cheesy noted. Krista the spirit caster jumped in, I could have given him a good price on a fire sacrifice. And everyone laughed. Every yajna involves a fire sacrifice, no matter what else it involves. Some can cost millions and last years. This Putrakamashti Yajna was conducted by Rishashringa to obtain sons for the childless king Dasharatha. Upon its successful completion, the god of fire, Lord Agni, would emerge from the flames carrying a golden vessel filled with divine payasam. King Dasharatha provided his queens with a divine payasam portion, each in turn. First was Queen Kausalya, who was instructed to drink half of the payasam. Queen Kausalya is considered to be the incarnation of Dara, wife of Dronavasu. She had received a boon from Vishnu previously that promised her that Vishnu would be born as her son in the Treta Yuga. She was the mother of Rama, the avatar of Vishnu. Next was the wise Sumitra, who was the second queen consort of Dasharatha. She received a quarter or half of that which remained. Queen Kaikeyi received an eighth, which again was half of that which remained. That still leaves an eighth, doesn't it? I asked. Yes, the final eighth was given to Sumitra, who having received 2 portions became the mother of twin sons. Lakshmana and Shatrana. Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharata. Uncle Artis, who had been listening intently from the background, asked, so all of these young fellas are princes, you say? Indeed, Artis, they with it and so much more, for the sons are endowed, to varying degrees, with the essence of the supreme entity Vishnu. They are all avatars of Vishnu and his weapons. Ravana could only be destroyed by a mortal, so Vishnu had no choice but to take mortal form. If you see one of the Indian gods with an abundance of faces, those are avatars or representations of that god, usually when they come to earth as a mortal. They usually come to prevent an earth-ending demon apocalypse. If you notice, some of them only have room for 1 more head. Sandy said and then continued, The boys were brought up as the princes of the realm, receiving instructions in the scriptures and in warfare from the sage Vashistha. When Rama reached 16, sage Vishwamitra came to the court of King Dasharatha seeking his assistance against demons which were disturbing his sacrificial rites. Shiva also arrived in Ayodhya as Madari, an entertainer with a street monkey. The monkey was Hanuman, who had been born at the time of Rama as an avatar of Shiva. The news of the monkey earned a command performance at the palace. Shiva, as Madari, was blissful on seeing Vishnu in child form. Rama was impressed by Hanuman and wished the monkey for himself, which Shiva was only too happy to comply with. Cheesy interrupted, "If you were a monkey, Sandy, I'd want to see you." And Krista asked, "Anjana was Hanuman's mother, right?" Quote, "Yes, and she was a big fan of Shiva, so she happily gave her child into his custody for the deception." Rama was impressed by Hanuman and wished the monkey for himself. That was a request Shiva was happy to comply with. Hanuman was then a companion of Rama until Hanuman left Ayodhya and joined the services of Vali and Sugriva of Kishkinda, the monkey kingdom. That, however, is a story for another day. Sandy took a drink then continued. Sage Vashistha was known for his feud with sage Vishwamitra. Sage Vishwamitra coveted Vashistha's divine cow Nandini, who could fulfill material desires. Sage Vashistha destroyed sage Vishwamitra's army and sons. Vishwamitra then acquired weapons from Shiva and incinerated Vashistha's hermitage and sons. The battle was fought because King Bharata appointed Vashistha instead of Vishwamitra as his main priest. Sage Vishwamitra took severe penances for thousands of years and became a Brahmarishi. He eventually reconciled with sage Vashistha. Sandy told us. 1,000 years of penance. How long can sages live? Magda asked. Some are immortal, it varies. Getting back to the story, when sage Vishwamitra comes to King Dasharatha for help, the boys are 16 years old. Vishwamitra chooses Rama, who is always followed around by his brother and shadow Lakshmana. Lakshmana will be Rama's constant companion throughout this story. Before going after Ravana, sage Vishwamitra provides Rama and Lakshmana instructions, as well as supernatural weapons to destroy the demon Tataka and many other demons they will meet along the way, sealing their greatness at an early age. Who is Tataka? Krista asked. In the forest, there was a broad class of nature spirits known as the Yakshas. They were usually benevolent, connected with water, fertility, trees, the forest, treasure, and wilderness. A Yaksha named Suketu granted Tataka's mother a daughter with the strength of 1,000 elephants named Tataka, but not a son. When she became of age, Tataka was married to Sunda, and gave birth to her own son named Maricha. Tataka and her children, Maricha and Sabahu, would harass and attack sages while they were performing their various yajnas in the forest. They attacked the seer Agastya, who cursed Marika to become a Rakshasa and cursed Tataka to become an ugly man-eater. Rama was sent to deal with Tataka. To attract Tataka, Rama simply twanged his bowstring, and she was on him like down on a duck. Rama shot and killed her with a single arrow to the chest. After Takata's death, Maricha ran off to Lanka to tell Ravana what has just transpired. You haven't heard the last of him though, Sandy told us and took a breath. He turned Maricha into a Rakshasa. Uncle Arthur inquired. Rakshasas were a race of mostly malevolent beings that resided on Earth, but possessed supernatural powers which they used for evil acts like disrupting sacrifices or eating humans. Many sages found themselves in vendettas with Rakshasas. The Rakshasas were a populous race of both good and evil. Powerful warriors, expert magicians, and amazing illusionists. As warriors they fought alongside the armies of both good and evil. As shape changes, they could assume different physical forms. As illusionists, they were capable of creating appearances which were real to those who believed in them or who failed to dispel them. Cloud the mind, Magda said matter-of-factly. Some man-eater Rakshasas made their gleeful appearances when the slaughter on a battlefield was at its worst. Sandy added. In another part of India, not known to Rama, Janaka, the king of Mithila, was out ploughing his field, as kings often did in those days, when a female child appeared in the deep furrow dug by his plough. Uncle Arthur interjected, "That's not where the little blighters come from in the top end, Sandy," in his best Aussie accent. Nevertheless, he was overwhelmed with joy at the miraculous gift of the gods. The child was named Sita, which is the Sanskrit word for furrow, and of course, Sita grew up to be a woman of unparalleled beauty and charm. Reminds me of my own adolescence, Krista informed the crowd. Sandy continued, with a princess so beautiful, the king needed a valiant suitor to earn her hand. He had to get rid of weak suitors, so he set a high standard for winning Sita's hand. He declared, "Whomsoever can hold and string the mighty bow of Shiva will win this princess." The king held a contest to see who could lift and wield a heavy bow that had been presented to his ancestors by Lord Shiva. The bow, known as the Pinaka, was the celestial bow of the deity Shiva. He used the bow when he was Tripurantaka, an avatar. The bow was given to Janaka's ancestor, Devarata, after he fought for them in a battle against the demons. It had since been kept in the king's family and was worshipped as if it was Shiva himself. A real King Arthur kind of test, Magda noted. And Lord Shiva none the less. In this case, the victor would be allowed to marry Sita. Sage Vishwamitra took Rama and Lakshmana to the town of Mithila to show them the bow. Of course, Rama lifted it up right away and goes on to wield the bow with such strength that he draws the string back and it broke. Rama not only won the hand of Sita, but it was a 4-for-4 deal with marriages arranged between the sons of King Dasharatha and the daughters of King Janaka. Rama married Sita of course while his brother Lakshmana hooked up with Urmila, Bharata tied the knot with Mandavi and finally, Shatrughna took his nuptials with Shrutakirti. 4 arranged marriages for the price of 1. Krista said, "Can you imagine the dowry?" The weddings were celebrated with great festivity in Mithila, but when the partying was done, the marriage party returned to Ayodhya. Rumors started to surface that King Dasharatha wanted to crown Rama king and the Kosala assembly and all the king's subjects expressed their agreement. That was too much for King Dasharatha's second wife Kaikeyi, who wanted her son to be king. Errol jumped in, "There's always a strong mother behind a successful son." Or so I've been told, and everyone laughed but no one laughed harder than his uncle Artis. I thought he was going to spit his beer out through his nose. Cheesy asked, "What's her ace up the sleeve?" And Sandy replied, 2 boons or promises that King Dasharatha had granted her long ago when she nursed him through an illness. Krista added, "She probably caused the illness in the first place." I would have. That makes the treatment a lot easier, and she tilted her head at her sister Magda, who nodded her agreement. Well, come on, what 2 wishes did she ask for? Uncle Artis queried, and Errol piped in, "What would you ask for Uncle Artis? Is he a king or a god?" "I'd make him bring back the Tassie tiger if he was a god." "If he was just a king, bring back the revolution," Uncle Artis replied. Well, Kaikeyi demanded that Rama be exiled into the wilderness for 14 years and her snot-nosed kid Bharata was to become king. That of course breaks King Dasharatha's heart, but he's constrained by his rigid devotion to his given word and grants Kaikeyi her demands. "You are the word you speak. Does Rama take that crap?" Errol asked. Yes, Rama accepts his father's reluctant decree with absolute submission and calm self-control. Throughout the Ramayana, Rama is a cool dude. Rama packed up his entourage, Sita his wife who could have remained in Ayodhya and Lakshmana his brother and constant shadow. They departed to the forest for the next 14 years. So, Sita could have stayed in town at the palace but chose to follow her husband. Krista asked. Yes, Krista, that's exactly what she did. Rama asked Sita not to follow him, but as the devoted wife she said, and I quote, "The forest where you dwell is Ayodhya for me and Ayodhya without you is a veritable hell for me." Sandy quoted, "True love is real. Is that the moral of this one, Sandy?" Krista asked with a chuckle. Just for you, Krista, I'm happy to say that after Rama's departure, King Dasharatha was unable to bear his grief and passed away. And Krista and Magda clapped. Harsh, I said. Sandy continued, meanwhile back in Ayodhya, Bharata, on a visit to his uncle, learned about how things went down with his mother and the king. It so happened, Bharata was not the snot-nosed prince he had been portrayed to be and refused to profit from his mother's wicked scheming. Everyone cheered. Bharata visited Rama in the forest and asked him to return and rule Ayodhya. Rama says, "Hell no mate, letter of the law and all that. Not before exile ends." Pip pip cheerio. Sandy's English, Aussie, Indian accent made everyone laugh. Bharata wasn't so bad. While Rama was exiled, Shatrughna dragged Kaikeyi's old nurse Manthara, responsible for poisoning the queen's mind against Rama, and tried to kill her. He was restrained by Bharata, who felt that Rama would not approve. Let's skip ahead in the Aranya-Kanda. After 13 years of exile, Rama, Sita and Lakshmana journey southward along the banks of the river Godavari, where they build cottages and endeavor to live off the land. Sandy told the crowd. Are any of those places real, Sandy? Uncle Artis asked. Oh yes. The Godavari is India's second longest river after the Ganga, with the source in Maharashtra. It flows east for 1,500 kilometers. At the Panchavati forest the group was visited by a Rakshasa named Shurpanaka who, unbeknownst to them, was the sister of Ravana the demon. Shurpanaka was the sister of Lanka's king, Ravana, as well as the daughter of the sage Vishrava and the Rakshasa Kaikeyi. Valmiki described Shurpanaka as facially unpleasant, pot-bellied, wry-eyed, coppery-haired, ugly-featured, brassy-voiced, deplorably oldish, a crooked talker, ill-mannered, uncouth, and abominable. Ravana was enraged with Shurpanakha for marrying a mortal enemy of his, Danava. Just as Ravana was about to kill Shurpanakha, his wife Mandodari and brother Kumbhakarna convinced him to send her to India instead. He did this, and there she met Rama in the forest of Panchavati and was instantly smitten by his good looks. She adopted a beautiful form to entice him, but Rama rejected her advances, telling her that he was faithful to his wife Sita. Rejected by Rama, Shurpanakha then approached Laxman, who also declined her affections. Infuriated by their rejection, Shurpanakha returned to her demonic form and attacked Sita with the intention of doing her bodily harm. However, she was thwarted by Lakshmana, who cut off her nose and ears. Sandy told us. "I smell vendetta," Cheesy predicted. That led Akampana to go to Lanka and tell Ravana what had happened. He decided that his best revenge would be kidnap Rama's wife Sita. "You've been reading ahead, Cheesy G. No heckling," Sandy admonished him. He coughed and continued. Her brothers Kara and Dushan organized an attack against the princes. In that battle, Rama defeats Kara and all of his Rakshasas. In a final effort, Maricha makes an appearance and assumed the form of a golden deer, which is so beautiful that Sita's must have it. He knew Krista just had to jump in. Oh yeah, shiny trinkets. Feigning to be dyslexic. On seeing the wondrous deer, Lakshmana sensed foul play and suggested that the deer was an illusory form of a demon, but Sita persuaded Rama to get her the deer, dead or alive. Rama chased the deer into the forest, leaving Sita under Lakshmana's guard. Finally, Rama seized the opportunity and shot it down with his golden arrow. When the dying Maricha was returning to his real form, he cried out, "Oh Sita! Oh Lakshmana! Come!" in the voice of Rama. Sita tells Lakshmana Rama is calling out to her and she is afraid for his life. She insists Lakshmana rush to Rama's aid. "Don't go, mate, she's playin' ya," Cheesy shouted from the audience. Lakshmana tried to assure Sita that Rama couldn't be hurt that easily and he should follow Rama's orders and stay to protect her. However, on the verge of hysterics, Sita insists Rama needs Lakshmana's help. Ultimately, he obeys her wish, but stipulates that she's not to leave the cottage or entertain any strangers. Sandy informed the anxious crowd. "Oh yeah, that door-to-door brush salesman," Cheesy said. Lakshmana draws a chalk outline around the cottage and casts a spell on it to prevent anyone from entering the boundary but allows people to exit. Yeah, he trusts her all right. Or maybe he knows the brush salesman, Krista suggested. Easy spell. With the coast finally clear, Ravana appears in the guise of a religious pilgrim requesting Sita's hospitality. Sita is tricked into leaving the circle and is forcibly carried away by Ravana. Sandy recounted. A religious pilgrim selling brushes to pay his way to Nirvana or Shangri-La. Cheesy told the rest of us. Jatayu, a vulture, saw what was happening and tried to rescue Sita, but he was mortally wounded. As we find out, he did manage to tell his brother about it, though before he cashed in his Atman. Sita was taken to Lanka and kept under the guard of Rakshasas. In his garden on Lanka, Ravana tried to convince Sita to marry him, but she refused because she was eternally devoted to Rama. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Rama and Lakshmana learn about Sita's abduction from Jatayu brother and immediately set out to save her. During their search for Sita, they encountered Kabanda and Shabari. Sandy sat back and took a drink from his stubby. Kabanda was a Rakshasa who was killed and freed from a curse by Rama and his brother. In reality, Kabanda was a Gandharva named Vishvavasu who was cursed to be an ugly, carnivorous demon Rakshasa by Indra, the king of heaven, and sage Ashtavakra. The brothers severed Kabanda's arms and cremated his corpse. Upon his death, Kabanda resumed his Gandharva form and directed Rama to the Rishamukha mountain. He told Rama that was where the exiled monkey king Sugriva was hiding from his brother Vali. Kabanda advised Rama to form an alliance with Sugriva, who would be of great assistance in the search for Sita. Sabari was an elderly woman described as an ardently devoted woman who received Rama's blessing due to her bhakti or ninefold devotion towards him. The sage Matanga told her if she offered service to Rama, he would give her darshana. Shabari awaited Rama's arrival for an eternity. Every day, Shabari would go out of her ashram, with the help of a walking stick, and pluck berries for Rama. She would pluck one, taste it and, if it was sweet, she would put it in her basket, discarding the bitter ones. Only the best for Rama. Upon his arrival, Rama chose to visit Shabari over hundreds of other worthy sages and tasted the fruits which she had meticulously collected. Lakshmana raised the concern that Shabari had already tasted the berries and therefore they were unworthy of Rama. Rama replied, "Whomsoever offers a fruit, leaf, flower or some water with love, I partake in it with great joy." Sabari aided them in their search for Sugriva and she received her darshana from Rama. Sugriva was a Varana, which were forest-dwelling humanoid apes, or human-like beings. They were shapeshifters, but in Vanara form, they had beards with extended sideburns, narrowly shaved chin gap, and no moustache. Additionally, they had tails and razor-sharp claws. Their skin and skeleton were enforced with an indestructible Vajra, which no earthly element could penetrate. Vali, Sugriva's brother and king of Kishkinda, had a boon that gave him the strength of more than 7.5 million elephants. Vanaras were created by Brahma just for the Ramayana, to help Rama in battle against Ravana. Kishkinda was their kingdom. Rama first met them in Dandaka forest. His quest brought the group to Pampa Lake at the foot of Mount Rishamukha, where the monkey king Sugriva and his cohorts were hiding. And Magda asked, who were they hiding from? Sugriva was being persecuted by his brother Vali, and he suspected Rama and Lakshmana may have been sent by Vali to kill him. He sends Hanuman undercover in the guise of a Brahmin to approach and casually ask the brothers about themselves. You boys come here often. Was he wearing a trench coat and dark glasses? Krista asked sarcastically. Sandy continued, Hanuman knew in an instant it was Rama and fell to his knees. He took Rama to Sugriva, who he had befriended. Sugriva needed Rama's help killing his brother Vali and restoring the kingdom of Kishkinda to him. In exchange, Sugriva agreed to help Rama recover Sita from Ravana. That's a fair deal, Uncle Artis chimed in. You could clearly tell he was enjoying the story, as was Uncle Arthur. Why was he in exile? Sugriva's brother was King Vali, a son of Indra, and the father of Angada. He obtained a boon that allowed him to receive half the strength of his opponents, which made Vali a formidable fighter. He was granted a boon by Brahma after sitting in penance. Vali asked Brahma for a boon such that in any duel, his opponent would lose half his strength to him. Brahma granted the boon happily. Already Vali was extremely powerful, and now with this addition, his power was equal to that of 7.5 million elephants, as I mentioned earlier. Vali became invincible, and it was said that no one could defeat him in head-on battle. One day a raging demon known as Mayavi came to the doors of Kishkinda and challenged Vali to a fight. Sage Valmiki tells us Daitya Maya had an affair with the nymph Hema, who gave birth to Mayavi. At any rate, Vali accepted the challenge, but when he came forward, Mayavi got terrified and ran into a cave. Vali entered the cave and told Sugriva to wait outside. Vali didn't return, and Sugriva heard demonic voices from inside the cave, and there was blood oozing out. Sugriva mistakenly concluded that Vali was dead. Sugriva closed the cave entrance with a large boulder, returns to town and presumed kingship over Kishkinda. He not only took over as king, but married Tara, Vali's wife. Meanwhile, inside the cave, Vali killed Mayavi and returned home to Kishkinda. Upon seeing Sugriva acting as king, Vali thought his brother had betrayed him. Rejecting Sugriva's explanation, he not only reacquired Tara, but also seized Ruma, Sugriva's wife, in retaliation. Sugriva tried to explain his actions, but Vali wouldn't listen, so he ran off to Rishamukha mountain, the only place Vali would not be unable to follow because of a curse by the sage Matanga. Sandy told us. Those sages were a cursing bunch, weren't they, Sandy? Uncle Arthur noted. Rama, having heard the story, agreed to help Sugriva regain the monkey kingdom of Kishkinda, and then Sugriva would help him save Sita. A wrestling match was organized, and Rama was going to kill Vali, but he couldn't determine which one was Vali, and Vali won the fight. They set up a rematch and make Sugriva look different, but Tara, Vali's wife and advisor, is not fooled and cautions Vali, urging him to forgive Sugriva. She suggests he anoint him as the crown prince in a diplomatic move and live peacefully with him. Befriend the exalted Rama, she suggests. Vali argues that a warrior like him cannot refuse any challenge. He promises to not kill Sugriva, but just crush his pride. While fighting, Rama shoots an arrow at Vali from behind, fatally wounding him. Nice shot, magic bow, of course, Krista interjected. In the back. You were right, Krista. Vali did not deserve to die. Rama had killed Vali, but blessed Vali that he himself would die of his arrow, which he would fire by camouflage when Vishnu took the incarnation of Krishna. Later on, Vali was born as Jara the hunter in Devapara Yuga to kill Krishna, the next avatar of Vishnu, in same way Rama killed him. Turnabout is fair play. After the victory, Sugriva was too busy partying to remember his promise to Rama, so Lakshmana kicks down the city gate and threatens to destroy Kishkinda if Sugriva doesn't honor his pledge to send out search parties. The clever former ape queen Tara, wife of Vali, intervened to prevent an enraged Lakshmana from destroying the ape citadel. She convinced Sugriva to honor his pledge by sending out search parties to the four corners of the earth, north, east, south and west. They all report back without a sign of their prey. The southern party under Angada, Tara and Vali's offspring and Hanuman learned from a vulture named Sampati that Sita was taken to Lanka. Errol asked, how did Sampati know where she had been taken? To which Sandy added, Sampati was the elder brother of Jatayu, whom you might remember died trying to save Sita. Of course, Lanka meant Sri Lanka. With his sharp vision, Sampati the vulture spotted Sita under an Ashoka tree in Lanka. Sandy took a moment, then began the next chapter, the Sundara Kanda. They travel to the shores of the ocean and the monkeys ask, who will fly to Lanka? Hanuman assumes a gargantuan form and makes a colossal leap across the sea to Lanka. As he passed over the ocean, a Rakshasa named Simhika captured his shadow. Simhika was a foe of the Vanara, so when Hanuman was crossing the ocean to Lanka, he assumed his gargantuan form, but what he didn't know is that Simhika was hiding in the ocean. She captured Hanuman's shadow with her magic. Hanuman had been forewarned about Simhika by Sugriva, and that's why he expanded his size. He observed Simhika's vulnerability when she followed suit and grew to a colossal size. When Hanuman turned himself small, Simhika swallowed him. It was a ploy by Hanuman, who came from within, ripping her apart and slaying her before he carried on his merry way. In other accounts, he merely kicked her to death. Sandy paused and continued. Hanuman decided to enter the heavily guarded city of Lanka in search of Sita. However, the powerful demoness Lankini guarded the city. Lankini was once the guardian of the home of Brahma. As she guarded the home of the creator, she became arrogant and prideful about her position. She treated others in the palace with contempt, due to which she was cursed by Brahma to guard the city of demons forever. Lankini realized her mistake and begged forgiveness. However, it was not possible for Brahma to take back the curse, and instead he gave her a boon that she would be freed of the curse only when a Vanara defeated her in combat and brings to end the age of the demons. When accosted by Lankini and asked about his identity and purpose of his visit, like any good customs officer would do, Hanuman cleverly replies that he has come from the forest desiring to see the famed city of Lanka and its beauty. Sandy was saying when he was interrupted. Big tourists those Varana. He probably has a camera around his neck, Krista noted. Lankini realized that he was an intruder and attacked him. Mindful of the fact that she was a demoness, Hanuman softly strikes her back just enough to make her fall and bleed. A dazed and confused Lankini immediately realizes her opponent was no mere monkey and asks for his forgiveness, knowing that Brahma's prophecy had just come true. Hanuman forgave her as he prepared to continue his quest into Lanka, leaving Lankini behind. On the way, Hanuman meets with many challenges, such as facing a Gandharva in the form of a demon that tested his abilities. What are Gandharva, Sandy? Uncle Artis asked. Gandharva are celestial beings whose males are divine singers and females are divine dancers. Hanuman explored Ravana's kingdom and spied on the demon himself. Eventually he located Sita in the Ashoka Grove, where she was being wooed and threatened at the same time by Ravana and his Rakshasas. They wanted her to marry him but threatened her if she didn't. Isn't that an all too familiar scenario? Demon woos girl, girl says no, demon threatens girl, Krista said, and we laughed. And there's a big monkey in a trench coat watching them from behind a tree. Hanuman lurks around in the shadows, and after the Rakshasas leave, he comes out of hiding to approach Sita. He narrates Rama's story to Sita and shows her Rama's signet ring he sent. Sita was overjoyed but tells Hanuman she has only 2 months to decide between marriage or death. Brutal, Magda noted. Hanuman reassured Sita, giving her Rama's signet ring as a sign of good faith, and offers to carry her back to Rama. She refuses and says that it's not the right Dharma. Dharma, the right way to live? Cheesy asked. Yes, it will not have significance if Hanuman carries her to Rama. Sita is quoted, when Rama was not there, Ravana carried Sita forcibly, and when Ravana was not there, Hanuman carried Sita back to Rama. Hanuman promised her he and Rama would return for her before the 2 months she had been given by Ravana to make up her mind about marrying him. As Hanuman was about to leave, Sita gave him her jewelry as a token of her love for Rama. He's going back empty-handed. Some search and rescue there was a artist. Don't hire a bleedin' monkey. That's the moral, Uncle Arthur replied sarcastically. Hanuman was upset, so he wreaked havoc on Lanka, destroying trees and buildings while killing Ravana's warriors. Realizing that wouldn't get him Ravana, he allowed himself to be captured, bound, and delivered to Ravana. Once standing in front of him, he gave Ravana a tongue lashing about releasing Sita. Like that's gonna help, Krista complained. Yeah, Ravana laughs and condemns Hanuman to have his tail set on fire. However, Ravana is foisted by his own petard. Hanuman escapes his chains and leaps from roof to roof, setting fire to Ravana's citadel. He escapes from his captures and makes it to the coast, where he takes the giant leap back from the island to India, where all his team were waiting. Sandy takes a deep breath and stands to stretch his legs. Do you want to pause there for tonight? And Uncle Arthur said, Ya bugger, you're leavin' tomorrow. Who's gonna finish tellin' me? Cheesy said, you leave that up to me, Uncle Arthur, and sit by your computer tomorrow night at this time. We're gonna take you on the rest of this trip by webcast. And everyone cheered and eventually found their way to their beds. In the morning we sat around the beach with some of us doing our yoga while others were having their coffee or breakfast. Magda informed us, now that I've seen and heard the whales, it is time for me to find the Tasmanian tiger. Where do we go from here, Errol? Well, the final captive Tasmanian tiger was caught in the Florentine Valley in 1933. That's in western Tasmania near Lake Gordon. There is a Florentine River in that area. We won't be in that area until the end of our trip. Over 7,000 sightings have come in and still no DNA samples are available to prove any of the sightings. A fella by the name of Neil Waters started the Thylacine Awareness Group of South Australia to follow up on sightings, on both the mainland and Tasmania. Perhaps we should contact him. I said, if there's hope of getting DNA proof of Tasmanian tigers still existing in their original form, then a diverse 9-strain pool may be possible to reset the equilibrium of the tiger's pendulum. A specimen was preserved in alcohol in 1866. Alcohol doesn't destroy DNA, so all that needs to be done is to catch one in the wild for comparison. That would provide 2 samples if the alcohol sample is viable and not too fragmented. You're right, no one has ever said that they could get DNA from the one they have. Everyone just assumes they can if they have something to extract DNA from. And then there's Benji who died less than 100 years ago. What happened to his body? Uncle Artis said. Dr. Ben jumped in, that's not quite true. I just watched a webcast by Dr. Terry Trask from a mainland university who claims to have the full genome of the thylacine. There was a female found with 4 pups in her pouch. They stored all 4 in separate alcohol bottles. Dr. Trask used one to exact the DNA. That would have been a mainland tiger, I think. I saw Travis signal Magda and the 2 of them had a discussion. She looked at me and signaled me to come over. When I got to where they were standing, she said, "Tell him, Travis." Travis said, "I knew about the 4 pups in the Melbourne University lab." And I said, "That probably wasn't a secret." And Magda said, "Wait, there's more." Travis went on to say, "When we were in Australia, we had a lot of different ways to make money from tourists when we weren't surfing. Some of the white fellas into surfing were university kids up north for the summer surf. They had lots of money and fancy equipment as well as fancy computers. One of them had a 3D printer and he stole one of the samples from the university so he could copy it and sell it as authentic. He just repackaged it in a bottle with some alcohol. Wow, what a scam. Nobody would open the jar because they'd think they were destroying it. Nobody could get DNA from it except a scientist, so why open it? Tourists would smuggle them out of the country and think they had a fabulous souvenir. How much did they get for one? $400 to $1,000 Australian dollars depending on the tourist. But here's the thing. I can get you the original still intact. If the others had DNA, then this one will too. He scanned it through the bottle. How much is the original going to cost me? I asked. Travis said, "Let me call my friend. He'll arrange to buy one and then substitute the real one in its place. I think $500 Australian dollars should ensure nobody is the wiser. Do it. If it's uncontaminated, it can be sequenced quicker or give us more good fragments. There are 3 billion letter codes in a DNA sequence, and it could be very fragmented after almost 100 years. I said. Magda asked, "What does this mean?" And I explained what it would take. We know they've used this animal to begin the genome sequencing at Melbourne University and had no luck finding any other samples. They took the Tasmanian devil DNA to fill the holes, but then found out the devil was not the closest living relative. That honor belongs to the numbat. Our best bet is to continue to collect samples, use the numbat as a filler and rebuild our own genome. The thylacine had a backward-facing pouch according to Dr. Ben. That could be important for several reasons if we're contemplating playing God here and introducing surrogates. Magda asked, could we use the one Dr. Trask has created? And I told her, yes, we could, but I don't know if we will have access to it through academic channels or not. Plus, that may give away what we are planning to do. Ultimately, if we can get a live sample or fresh DNA, then that would change the game totally. We rejoined the group and joined into the conversation. Everyone tries to capture them on trial cameras, and when they do, they debate for the next 2 years whether it was a paddymelon or not. Dr. Ben noted. Uncle Artis added, I don't think you need to go to specific areas because wherever there's forest, some paddymelons and kangaroos for tucker, then they can do well. There are lots of places in Tassie that don't have anyone to hear the trees fall. In fact, 3 years ago video was captured of a tiger in Hobart. Okay then, our next stop will be the Blue Tier Reserve to see the widest tree in the world. That's an extremely remote area in the northeast, Errol told us. We said our goodbyes to Uncle Arthur for now and promised to see him again soon. With our vehicles packed up we set out. "Don't forget me, Cheesy, I'll be hooked up and signed in," he said and waved a goodbye to us. We left Dolphin Sands and took the Tasman Hoy or A3 into Swansea. From there we followed the A3 to the A4 at Bacino, where we made a quick stop to see the epic blowhole, on the advice of Travis. The next stretch ran along the coast past pristine beaches and farmland for kilometre after kilometre. Our trail passed through the chain of lagoons, a picturesque transition from the ocean to the Elephant Pass Road which meandered back and forth as it climbed higher and higher. Scenic Street. Mary's was our next town before hooking up with the Esk Hoy to travel through beautifully manicured farmland all the way to Mathna. Can you just imagine at sunrise to see a tiger running across farmland to move from one forest tract to another? Magda asked. We all ran the image through our minds. Travis enlightened us on the local history. Mathna was an indigenous girl who lived from the mid-1800s, was adopted and later abandoned by the governor of Tasmania, Sir John Franklin. Mathna was born as Mary on Flinders Island to the chief of the Laurine tribe, Taugra, and his wife Wongonip. The tribe was captured by the chief protector of Aborigines in 1833. That's ironic, isn't it? Oh, this place, Magda said as she turned to look at Krista. Travis continued, Mary was renamed Mathna when she was 6 and adopted by Sir John, who was a famous Arctic explorer, and his wife the Lady Jane Franklin. Mathna was raised with Sir John's daughter Eleanor, but when he was recalled to England, he left Mathna at Queen's Orphan School in Hobart at the age of 8. She met a sad end at 17 when she drowned in a puddle while intoxicated. The town of Mathna was named after her. Dr. Ben added, and a very special mushroom was also named after her, the Entoloma mathani. Finding that mushroom 10 years ago opened up a whole new family of mushrooms and a general reclassification of many fungus. All of those mushrooms are only found here in this unique place. From Mathna we took the Plains Road to Ringarooma, on the Ringarooma River where they specialized in dairy farming. Branksome was a scenic little village we passed through next and then on to the Derby Back Road to Worldborough. Giant ferns started to appear in the forest and this change of habitat got us keeping an eye open for tigers, especially when Travis told us this heavily forested country was prime habitat for thylacines. St. Columba Falls was the scene of a famous sighting 25 years ago, when a local ranger reported spotting a tiger sitting on a rock ledge near the falls. It was just one of a dozen sightings in this region each year. Tamor added, it's only a half-hour drive to St. Columba from where we're camping. We can go for the day, plant a couple cameras and then return for them before we leave this area. And Krista voiced her approval at that plan. We can set some up around our camp too. Cheesy added, I have a couple I can access remotely from a decent distance. If we find a good overlook, we can plant a couple with infrared and Bluetooth Wi-Fi. How far can the Bluetooth reach? I asked and Cheesy answered, currently 100 feet, but I'm working to extend that with another computer. The camera on this unit is sweet and the infrared motion detection is fast, so we should get some crisp photos and video when we're not running it live. Resolution is 1296p. The Bluetooth wireless camera is IP66, which is a waterproof rating, so it can handle rain in this harsh environment. A smartphone app gives me full remote control. We left the main road and took the Lotta Road into the Blue Tier Wilderness to get to the Blue Tier Giant Walkway. Uncle Artis had definitely purchased the right vehicles for us if this was typical off-road Tasmania. Mushrooms were everywhere in the forest leaf litter and on the trees. Leeches seemed to like this wet environment as well. The one tree in particular that I wanted to see was the Blue Tier Giant. It's the most massive tree in Tasmania with an estimated volume of 290 cubic meters. After an hour of downhill travel through forest that seemed primitive to me with giant ferns, mosses, and flowering plants, we entered a Jurassic Park environment. We finally came upon the giant standing there in all its majesty. That was one big toothpick and Magda asked if I was going to take a core sample. I'm sure she didn't believe that, but a DNA sample would be awesome, so we looked around on the ground. The trip back to the cars took us a little longer than the trip to the tree, so by the time we located our camping spot it was late afternoon. The first step in setting up our 4-day camp was to have Travis and Tamor scan the area for snakes before we even got out of the vehicles. A threat from Mary was obviously something to be taken seriously. Errol told us about the Blue Tier Reserve as we set up camp. It's pretty big, mate, at 85 hectares of habitat for rare and threatened species like the eastern quoll, Dasyurus vivarinus, the spotted-tailed quoll, Dasyurus maculatus, and the Tasmanian devil Sarcophilus harrisii. This was the area where the devil facial tumors got their early start. And don't forget Tasmania's largest endemic stag beetle, the Simpson's stag beetle, a threatened species also exclusive to this region. We brought out a scientist looking for them last year and spent 2 weeks babysitting him. I thought Tamor was gonna leave a snake in his bedroll, Travis said. Dr. Ben added, Something like devil facial tumors need something to trigger them or get them started in the first place. Whatever that was, it must be here. And Magda said, "That's a chilling thought, Dr. Benby. Thanks for that." Errol continued, "The Blue Tear Reserve is a glacial refugium with rainforest species dating back 65 million years to the supercontinent of Gondwana, when rainforests covered the landmass almost from one end to the other. That's a time even before Pangaea, when Australia and Tasmania broke off from India and set sail on the plate train for their current location." Dr. Ben added, "In that world it was the myrtle beech, Nothofagus cunninghamii, woolly tea tree, Leptospermum lanigerum for the rainforest, and wet forests were crowned with swamp gums and Eucalyptus rhenans since before the last ice age about 18,000 years ago." "Long before that, Dr. Ben," I said, and added, "Some trees from that period have been found on the Australian mainland near Sydney. Those were my trees, I thought. If I was ever going to do anything with plant DNA, it was going to be here. Trees, fungus, and animals. This place had the whole package for me. I was going to come back here and core some of these trees for their DNA someday. Certainly not the giant, but some of his younger siblings. I knew there was a story in those ancient trees. 4 of the world's 10 tallest tree species occur in eastern Tasmania, including the tallest angiosperm, the giant ash, Eucalyptus rhenans." I said. "What's an angiosperm?" Sandy asked. "It's a plant that has flowers and produces seeds enclosed within a carpel. The angiosperms are a large group and include herbaceous plants, shrubs, grasses, and most trees. The Eucalyptus ovata and Calitris oblonga communities are endemic to eastern Tasmania," I told him. Errol pointed out, "The canopy of old-growth tree hollows provide refuge for iconic birds like the Tasmanian masked owl, Tyto novahollandi, and the yellow-tailed black cockatoo, Calyptorhynchus funereus." And Krista added, "Owls are so much smarter than you think they are. I almost chose one before I found Thief." I said to Cheesy, "Ferns, mosses, and spectacular fungi thrive in this damp, dark, cool environment, and a multitude of invertebrates break down leaf litter and return the nutrients to Gaia. The fungi are of particular interest to me because we need to learn more about mushroom spores and why and how Lord Andrew used them in India to train karma." Travis said, "An abundance of marsupials like kangaroos, wombats, wallabies, ringtail possums, long-nosed potoroos, and echidnas are here. All the thylacines' favorite foods inhabit this area. The bird life is just as varied. According to Travis, we could see almost 100 species at some point in the year, from tiny honeyeaters, wrens, and robins mixed with larger species like terns, gannets, albatrosses, and oyster catchers." With camp set up and a fire started, it was time to get the evening meal underway. Cheesy, Dr. Ben, and Sandy went off with Timur to set up the cameras that Cheesy had acquired. He wanted to get them as far away from the camp as possible, but within reach of his remote control system so he could watch the live feed from camp. The rest of us prepared dinner and set up for the night's campfire. After the meal, Cheesy connected with Uncle Arthur for the conclusion of Sandy's story, but Magda and Krista had a surprise for him first. They had promised to learn Waltzing Matilda and play it for him. All went quiet as they began to play. Once a jolly swagman camped by a billabong, under the shade of a coolabah tree. And he sang as he watched and waited, till his billy boiled. "You'll come a waltzing Matilda, with me," and it was absolutely beautiful, with Magda strumming the melody on her guitar and Krista creating notes on her flute that seemed to weave themselves through the upper canopy. I can't help thinking if Magda were playing the cello, it would have been extremely haunting as it echoed through this forest glade. Cricky, I can't believe it. That was awesome, girls. The best version I ever heard, and we could see him wipe a tear from his eye. For an ex-army officer, he was a real pussycat. Is everybody ready to hear the conclusion of the Ramayana? Sandy asked, and everyone responded in the positive as they positioned themselves around the fire and got comfortable. "Can you see and hear all right, Uncle Arthur?" Someone asked, and as he confirmed he could, we heard the tab snap on a cold beer. Pissed. In the next chapter, the Yuddha-Kanda, our sage follows the war between the army of Rama and the army of Ravana. Having received Hanuman's report on Sita, Rama and Lakshmana proceed, with their allies, towards the shore of the southern sea on their way to Lanka. There they were joined by Ravana's renegade brother Prince Vibhishana, who was willing to fight against his brother. Vibhishana was the younger brother of Ravana, the king of Lanka. Though a Rakshasa himself, Vibhishana turned his back on Ravana owing to his dharma. Prince Vibhishana was portrayed as pious and pure of heart. After performing a penance to invoke a boon from Brahma, he begged the deity to always set his mind on the path to righteousness, and nothing more. He divulged the secrets of Ravana's army to make sure Rama was victorious in the great battle. "How are they going to get to Lanka, Sandy?" Krista asked in a voice she obviously saved for setting up the next exciting event. The apes, Neela and Nala, construct a floating bridge known as the Rama Setu across the sea using stones that could float on water. You can still see it today. Nila, who was the commander-in-chief of the monkey army, could get the stones to float on water by writing Rama's name on them. Twin brother apes, Nila and Nala, constructed the floating bridge. In their youth, these monkeys were very mischievous and would throw the holy icons worshipped by the sages into the water. As a remedy, they decreed any stone thrown by them in the water would not drown, thus saving the Murtis. Nala was the Vanara credited as the engineer of the Rama Setu. He was the son of the architect god Vishwakarma. The bridge is also known as Nala Setu or the Bridge of Nala. He paused for a moment. The princes and their armies crossed over the floating bridge across the ocean between Ramaswaram to Lanka. The conflict began in earnest. Then Sandy continued. During one particular battle, Ravana's son Indrajit hurled a powerful weapon at Lakshmana that badly wounded him. The feared for his life, but Hanuman knew how to cure Lakshmana. He assumed his gigantic form and flew from Lanka to the Himalayas, coming to rest on Mount Sumeru. He looked for an herb he knew could cure Lakshmana, but couldn't find it, so he decided to bring the entire mountain back to Lanka. "Wow, that's one big ass monkey," Cheesy said and whistled. Errol added, "He makes Godzilla look like a chimp." Sandy went on. Rama pursued Ravana in his chariot and fired golden arrows at him which turned into serpents as they reached Ravana. The arrows cut off Ravana's many heads, but the heads immediately grew back. "Many heads," Uncle Artus exclaimed, and Sandy corrected himself. "Oh yes, don't forget that Ravana had 10 heads. He was cutting them off for Brahma to earn a boon. I guess I didn't tell you they grew back." "Good catch, Uncle Artus, you're paying attention." The fight went on for days and right through the nights as Ravana shot hundreds of arrows back at Rama. They were engaged in a fight to the death. Matali, Rama's charioteer, watched the struggle and suggested to Rama, "To kill Ravana, you must use the dreaded arrow of Brahma, given to you by Agastya, which never misses its target. Sweet, magic arrow. Straight from Brahma, can't miss." "What the hell was he saving it for?" Cheesy exclaimed. Sandy confirms the arrow's potency. Rama shoots the divine arrow which pierces Ravana's heart and kills him. Everyone gave a cheer for Rama that turned into a chant, "Rama's good, Rama's great." Rama then installs Prince Vibhishana as king of Lanka. Out with the bad brother, in with the good brother. Upon releasing Sita from the garden and seeing her for the first time, Rama said, "The dishonor dealt to Rama and the wrong dealt to Sita by Ravana has been wiped out by this victory with the assistance of Hanuman, Sugriva and Vibhishana." Then Rama, Sita and his posse returned home to India and the monkeys returned to Kishkinda. Krista interjected, "Yeah, Rama seems like a guy who would refer to himself by his own first name. He didn't give his brothers any credit either." "Oh, what a happy ending," Magda said. Sandy replied, "I'm sorry Magda, but there is so much more to this story." "Ha, Sandy pulled an M. Night Shyamalan on us. What a twist," Cheesy announced. A few months after their return, Rama became somewhat suspicious of the character of Sita. After all, she had just spent time in the company of Ravana, a charming 10-headed demon. So, Rama decided to disown her and asked her to ply her trade elsewhere. Sita asked Rama why she was not abandoned when Hanuman came to her in Lanka. When she doesn't like the answer, she requests Lakshmana prepare a pyre for her to enter and prays to the god Agni. Sita enters the pyre to prove her conjugal fidelity. Eventually, the god Agni appears, in person leaving the burning pyre, carrying Sita in his arms, and he restores her to Rama, thereby testifying to her purity. Rama joyfully accepts her back as his wife. Everyone applauded. End one book, start the next. In the Uttarakhanda, sage Valmiki talks about Rama's reign of Ayodhya, the birth of his sons and the Ashvamedha Yajna. The time for Rama's exile to expire arrived and he returns to Ayodhya with Sita, Lakshmana, and Hanuman, where a great coronation is performed. Sandy paused and then continued, when asked to prove his devotion to Rama, Hanuman rips his chest open and on his chest is an image of Rama and Sita. For some reason that struck everyone's funny bone and a hysterical laughter went up. Rama ruled Ayodhya, where his reign was referred to as Ram Raja, or a place where the common folk are happy, fulfilled, and satisfied. One day while strolling through town, as kings often do, Rama overheard the conversation of a fisherman and his wife. The wife allegedly spent the night in his absence and the fisherman was furious. The fisherman said to his wife, "Do you think I am Rama who will take you back?" And he dispatched her. That upset Rama because Sita had proven to everyone that she was pure through the Agni Parvesh. When Sita got wind of the incident, she insisted on going into exile because Ayodhya was more important than she was. Sita was so self-sacrificing. Magda noted and feigned a mock tear and Krista pretended to comfort her. Rama tried to stop her, but she went with Lakshmana into the forest. In the forest, Sita found refuge in sage Valmiki's ashram where she gave birth to twin sons, Lava and Kusha. And before you can ask Krista, less than 9 months. Meanwhile, back in Ayodhya, Rama conducts an Ashvamedha Yajna, which is a holy declaration of the authority of the king. The Ashvamedha was a horse sacrifice ritual used by kings to prove their imperial sovereignty. A horse, accompanied by the king's warriors, would be released to wander freely for a year. In the territory traversed by the horse, any rival could dispute the king's authority by challenging the warriors accompanying it. After 1 year, if no enemy had managed to kill or capture the horse, the animal would be guided back to the king's capital. The horse would be sacrificed, and the king would be declared the undisputed sovereign of all the land the horse traversed. The horse to be sacrificed must be a white stallion with black spots. The construction of a special, sacrificial house, and a fire altar are focal points for the ceremonies. During the Ashvamedha ceremony, sage Valmiki brought Lava and Kusha to attend along with Sita in disguise. This actual ceremony was practiced many times in the 1600s. As a king, did Rama have to perform many yajna for which a wife was essential? Krista asked. Uncle Arthur interjected, what's a yajna? A yajna is a ritual performed in front of a sacred fire while chanting mantras, but it can have many other facets to it as well. When Rama's spiritual master told him to marry another wife, Rama flatly refused. He asked his spiritual master for an alternative and was told that a statue of pure gold could be substituted for his better half during a yajna. Sweet, gold always smooths things over though, doesn't it? Cheesy rhetorically asked. Not just one gold statue Cheesy, but every time he had to perform a yajna, he had to create a new statue. I guess gold is not reusable from a spiritual perspective. Rama soon got himself into a bit of a funk and began thinking the time may have come for him to wind up his divine play on earth and return to his godly abode. He's confronted by all of the golden statues of Sita who say to him, how can you leave us and go alone? Who will take care of all your wives? As an ideal husband you must take us with you. This made Rama feel awkward and he said, how can I take you all as my wife? I cannot take more than one wife, but I promise all of you that in my next incarnation I will accept all of you as my wife. You will all become my intimate gopis. Sweet deal for Rama Sandi, but what exactly is a gopis? Krista had to ask. Gopi is a Sanskrit word used to refer to the wives of Gopa of Braj. Gopis are famous within the Vaishnavism for their unconditional devotion to Krishna. That story is described in the Bhagavata Purana. It might not be a good enough deal for you, Krista, but the golden statues were appeased. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Sita was staying at Valmiki's house with her twins and the Ashvamedha horse was prancing about the local forest. Lava and Kusha, the twins, captured the horse and defeated the entire army of Ayodhya which came to protect it. After all, they were the sons of Rama, weren't they? Then the brothers battled their uncles in single file order, Shatrana, Lakshmana and then Bharata to the defeat of each. Rama himself had to take the battlefield along with Hanuman. The battle didn't go well for Hanuman because Lava and Kusha took him prisoner and delivered him to their mother Sita. When Sita saw Hanuman bound up, she told the boys to release him and then she sought sage Valmiki's help. Valmiki told her to let nature take its course and wait to see what happens. Then Valmiki told the boys, Rama's your father. Go touch his feet and beg his pardon for your rudeness. The boys did that, and Rama accepted their apology, recognizing him as his sons. Sandi said, are all his brothers dead? Errol asked. Of course not. Sage Valmiki sprinkled a little magic water on Shatrana, Lakshmana and Bharata to revive them. In that reality the dead don't stay dead forever. Valmiki advises the brothers to go to Ayodhya and tell the story of Sita's sacrifice to the common folk. They face many difficulties convincing people that Sita's a catch. Hanuman decides to help the boys and finds out Nagrasen, who had a history of hatred towards Sita, was challenging Sita's character and asking that she prove her purity once again. Again. How many times does this poor girl have to prove herself? Krista demanded. Sita is consumed by emotion and decides to return to Mother Earth from whence she came. She says, if I am pure, this earth will open and swallow me whole. And at that very moment the earth opened and swallowed Sita whole. Sandi paused for people to take it in. Could she not have phrased the better Sandi? I asked. Rama continued to rule Ayodhya for many years until finally he took Samadhi into the Sarayu river along with his 3 brothers and left this world to return to Vaikuntha. Samadhi being the highest state of mental concentration that a person can achieve while still bound to the body and which unites them with the highest reality. In his godly realm of Vaikuntha, Rama was Vishnu, Lakshmana was Shesh, Bharata is Vishnu's conch and Shatrana was the Sudarshan chakra. And just for Krista, Sita was there in Vaikuntha in the form of Lakshmi. Perhaps we can have a Lakshmi story sometime in the future, you'd like her. In the northern, central, and western states of India, the festival known as Dussehra marks the day when Lord Rama killed the demon king Ravana. Other parts of India celebrate the festival of Dussehra for different reasons. My personal favorite festival is Diwali, which symbolizes the spiritual victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and knowledge over ignorance. Lots of colored paint gets thrown around. The festival, in some regions, is a celebration of the day Rama returned to Ayodhya. Errol asked, why are the festivals based on different events depending on where you live in India? And Sandy replied, because Indian sages were prolific at recanting stories of Indian gods and goddess who lived for a long time and had lots of interesting adventures all over India and Sri Lanka. Add to that Buddhist and Jain beliefs and there's a massive amount of documented culture to choose from. I added, you're indeed fortunate. There are many peoples in the world who have no written culture either because their ancestors didn't possess a written language or invading churches and countries destroyed all documents that didn't support their own doctrines. Krista and Magda were joined by Travis, Tamor, Sandy and Uncle Artis hunched around the computer monitor that Cheesy had set up to view the two cameras. This gave Dr. Ben, Errol, Cheesy and I an opportunity to discuss some science. Sue and I have been monitoring the advancements in CRISPR technology with great interest. Development has been escalating rapidly with so many worldwide research projects based on it now, walls are falling. They've had the sequenced genome of the Aedes aegypti mosquito for 15 years, but now they can edit it using CRISPR-Cas9. That's going to tilt the playing field in our favor if we can master that technology. There are so many things we have to be good at these days. I sometimes think Leonardo da Vinci had it easy. What exactly is CRISPR? Sandy asked and Dr. Ben told him, CRISPR-Cas design tools are computer software platforms and bioinformatics tools used to allow the design of guide RNAs or gRNAs for use with the CRISPR-Cas gene editing system. Guide RNA function as guides for RNA or DNA targeting enzymes which they form complexes with on their mission to delete, insert, or otherwise alter the targeted RNA or DNA. They occur naturally, serving important functions, but can also be designed as tools for targeted editing of DNA with CRISPR-Cas9 and CRISPR-Cas12. With the modifications in the CRISPR RNA sequences of the guide RNA, the binding location can be changed. Cheesy noted, a user-defined program. The desired target sequence must precede the protospacer adjacent motif, known as PAM, which is a short DNA sequence usually 2 to 6 base pairs in length. It follows the DNA region targeted for cleavage by the CRISPR system in use, such as CRISPR-Cas9. What is Cas9? Errol asked. Cas is an endonuclease enzyme that cuts the DNA at a specific location directed by a guide RNA that knows where that is. New systems are even starting to rear their heads like CRISPR-Cas13, with unique characteristics leveraged for sensitive diagnostic tools such as Sherlock. Quote, CRISPR is an acronym for something obviously. Cheesy stated the obvious. Yes, it is cheesy, clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. Does that clear it up for you? Quote, no, Cheesy told him. It refers to the 3 billion DNA code letters of the base pairs and its associated Cas enzymes which can target and edit those codes. When prokaryotes are infected by phages and manage to fend off the attack, specific Cas enzymes will cut the phage DNA or RNA and integrate the parts in between the repeats of the CRISPR sequence. The stored segments can then be recognized in future virus attacks and Cas enzymes will use RNA copies of them, together with their associated CRISPR segments, as gRNA to identify the foreign sequences and render them harmless. CRISPR components are being engineered into bacteriophages, arming them against pathogenic bacteria, including antimicrobial-resistant bacteria. In phage therapies, CRISPR-wielding bacteriophages may kill bacteria or compel them to carry out useful functions. Another option is SNIPER, which may be able to bind to all the bacteria in a species by using a guide RNA that is specific for a genetic sequence present in one strain of bacteria and absent in another. It will target and kill only the bacteria that carry that specific genetic target. Cheesy said, I know SNIPER, a Bayesian probabilistic model, an algorithm to map to genes. Dr. Ben replied, in genetics, a locus is a specific, fixed position on a chromosome where a particular gene or genetic marker is located. The conversation ended there as we migrated over to the computer monitoring the area around the camp and a couple of devils were having it out over some roadkill Tamor had left out for them. Uncle Artis had a couple of thylacine-seeking mates living in the area that he wanted to visit while he was there, so he didn't come with us to St. Columba. It was well under an hour from our campsite, and we crossed a couple of rivers, or perhaps the same river more than once, I'm not really sure. The journey was winding and twisting while at some points seeming to retrace its steps. We left the Lotta Road and followed the Anchor Road, which would have been stressful for most, but our vehicles were up to the challenge. The St. Columba Falls Road joined the Tasman Hoy and we travelled through an area of cultivated farmland that seemed to stretch in all directions. Things got sketchier when the road left the farmland and began following the St. Columba River gorge through the thickest forest I'd seen yet. We climbed the track and viewed the falls from several different viewing platforms and rock outcrops. The water dropped from a reasonably lofty position, but on the day we were there the flow was minimal, which probably diminished its impressiveness. On a rainy day, Travis said it cascaded over the cliff with a lot more gusto. The water supplied a lush environment hosting plants I'd never seen before and many I didn't know the name of or even the genus. Travis and Timur scouted out potential camera spots but were not impressed with what was available for various reasons. I saw some good locations near Halls Falls and Lenners Ridge Road where the forest opens up into grassland. We might be able to catch a tiger crossing from one area to another over the night or early morning. That perspective would give us a better image than we would get in the darker forest cover. They also must cross a river to go back and forth, Travis said, and we all agreed that made sense. The areas he was talking about were roughly halfway back to our camp, so they would be even easier to retrieve. We got back to camp in time to explore the immediate area before getting dinner underway and setting up for the night's campfire. Tonight, we planned to watch the cameras while Travis and Timur moved through the brush around it. Uncle Artis returned from his visit with a couple of new sightings. One was about 30 kilometers to the north. It was seen crossing a river, but no video was captured. They did get some good prints, however. The other one was about 50 kilometers north of that, and they do have a video. I saw it. It was shot in the forest and is a little dark and grainy, but you can see the thick kangaroo-like tail sticking straight out the back. The gait of the animal looked very tiger-like as well. Dr. Ben asked Errol about the devil's backstory and current predicament. The Tasmanian devil cells have 14 chromosomes which occur in 7 pairs and include the sex chromosomes, X and Y. The oldest known strain of the tumor cells had 13 chromosomes, 9 of which are recognizable and 4 of which are mutated, marker, chromosomes. When scientists collected and compared healthy and diseased devils across the island, they found the chromosomes of tumor cells looked strikingly different from those of healthy cells. What are chromosomes? Uncle Artis asked, and Dr. Ben replied, chromosomes are long strands of DNA that are coiled up to form rod-shaped structures inside cells. We can see them under the microscope. They keep DNA tightly wrapped around spool-like proteins, called histones, otherwise it would be too long to fit inside cells. They are also a key part of the process that ensures DNA is accurately copied and distributed in cell divisions, but mistakes do occur on rare occasions. Changes in the number or structure of chromosomes in new cells may lead to serious problems. In humans, one type of leukemia and some cancers are caused by defective chromosomes made up of joined pieces of broken chromosomes. In reproductive cells, such as eggs and sperm, they must contain the right number of chromosomes and correct structure. Otherwise, resulting offspring may fail to develop properly. Humans with Down syndrome have 3 copies of chromosome 21, instead of the 2 copies found in other people. So why the big deal over 13 versus 14 when apes and humans are in the 20s? I asked. Errol continued, normally, a Tasmanian devil cell has 14 chromosomes, which together contain all genes necessary to live and build new ones. In the tumor cells, though, some of the chromosomes were absent, while other seemingly random chromosomes suddenly appeared. Even more intriguingly, every tumor sample showed the same pattern of modifications in the devil's chromosomes. That would be quite strange, Dr. Ben said, especially when cancer generally emerges through a series of random mutations and changes to DNA. It would be almost impossible for so many individuals to accrue the same exact mutations in their DNA. Errol noted, the lead scientists realized the deadly cancer spreading through the population might be transmissible from one animal to another through bites to the face. Travis, who was listening in the background, piped in, that's just natural devil behavior. You saw the true nature of the devil last night. He motioned to Timur and they set off on a journey in the dark. What does the disease look like exactly, Errol? Dr. Ben asked. The visible signs of DFTD begin with lumps of soft tissue around the mouth that ulcerate and aggressively destroy underlying jawbone, interfering with their feeding. There's often more than one primary tumor, and they can also cover their eyes. Devils usually die within 6 months of contracting DFTD from organ failure, secondary infection, or metabolic starvation. It affects males and females equally, but it's rare in juveniles, Errol told us. Dr. Ben added, yeah, that's strange. Nearly all forms and types of cancer that humans experience are born from some form of mutation in our DNA, including randomly acquired mutations and environmental damage to DNA like tobacco, pollutants, and the sun. A small number of cancers in humans form following infection by specific types of viruses termed oncoviruses. One notable example is the human papillomavirus or HPV family, which has caused cervical and other types of cancer following infection. Errol stated, the answer lies in the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC, I think Dr. Ben. MHC is a group of proteins present on the surface of almost every cell in the body. The job of MHC is to communicate with the immune system. Let it know there is a viruses or bacteria at the door. Dr. Ben replied, yes, an immune cell encountering a cell of your lung. MHC is the password to show your lung cell belongs to you. Move along, this cell has no weapons, there's nothing to see here. Just dividing. While MHC is vital to your autoimmunity, its protection has a short reach. MHC is highly specific to each individual, hence the problem of transplant rejection with human organs. And at the same time, Errol jumped in. This detail generally prevents things like transmissible cancers. If a cancer cell from one person somehow infiltrated the body of a second person, the immune system of the latter would likely see the cancer cell's MHC as foreign and would thus eliminate it, preventing the cancer's growth. The devil's cancer cells have lost this MHC. As a result, their immune systems are unable to recognize the cancer cells as foreign and dangerous. When the devils fight and bite one another, cancer cells are transferred from one animal to the next, and the lack of MHC allows these foreign cancer cells to go undetected by the bitten animal's immune system. Errol asked Dr. Ben, my question to you, Dr. Ben, is why can't we inform on the tumor to the devil's immune system? If a devil experienced the cancer in their body, then their immune system would be triggered, and we could capture the change to create the vaccine. And Dr. Ben shook his head and said to Errol, we'll have to answer many of those questions together. Magda had joined the conversation and asked, aside from all the science you guys are applying, what's been done for existing devils who can't dream generations ahead of themselves and have little devil babies to feed right now? Errol informed her, the Devil's Ark project is an initiative of the Australian Reptile Park and is selecting genetically diverse breeding stock. 2 insurance populations of disease-free devils have been established, one in Taroona and the other on Maria Island. Captive breeding in mainland zoos is also possible, but breeding devils is a real art because the male may kill the female before they get the job done if they are put together too soon. With decreased life expectancy of the devils with DFTD, affected individuals have begun breeding at younger ages in the wild. They may only live to participate in one breeding cycle. The aim is to create 1,000 genetically representative devils and release them on the Tasman Peninsula, which has narrow access points controlled by physical barriers. They are almost islands in themselves. Where did it start, Errol? Krista asked. It started around Mount William, which is northeast of where we are here. Around the same time, farmers reported a decline in devil numbers near Little Swanport and on the Freycinet Peninsula. 21 different subtypes have been identified by analyzing the mitochondrial and nuclear genomes of more than 100 tumors from different devils. Initially, they suspected the devils had low genetic diversity, so their immune system didn't recognize the tumor cells as foreign. However, it was later demonstrated that devils are sufficiently genetically diverse enough to mount a strong immune response to foreign tissue. 3 females have been found that are partially resistant to DFTD. A devil population in the far southwest of Tasmania has been reported to be free of DFTD. I thought to myself, why can't we compare the resistant DNA to all of the others and simply be Dr. CRISPR cut and paste? 5 years, no more. How did all this happen in the first place? Magda asked. Calicivirus, 1080 poison, agricultural chemicals, and habitat fragmentation combined with a retrovirus were all proposed causes. Environmental toxins are always great suspects, like the fire retardant they spray in the north to prevent wildfires. Perhaps they sacrificed devils for trees by accident. Travis and Tamor returned from the bush. We left some treats out for the devils in line with the camera. They probably won't come to get it until first light, but if there is a tiger around it may find it first. You're a doll, Tamor. Let's watch the live feed, Krista said. Cheesy said, I'll show you how to switch between cameras on the laptop. You can start and stop them or let them detect motion. You can even pan and zoom. I've got my nerd buddies at school outfitting some of these for Jeffrey at Windhaven and probably a bunch for here too. I won't be happy until I can light up all of Tasmania from my den. We'll find those tigers and keep an eye on the devils too. Uncle Artis snapped the tabs on a few cold brews and passed him out while the rest of us got comfortable listening to Magda and Travis play multiple requests. They could easily have taken the show on the road. The next day was bright and sunny, but that fact wasn't obvious under the 70-meter canopy of dense forest. Finding a sunny patch for morning yoga was risky because the snakes were looking for exactly the same place for the same reason. I did most of my meditating in the shade. We decided today would be a good day to find out what mushrooms and fungi could be found in this part of the world at this time of year, so we made a contest of it. Okay, here are the teams for today's first annual Tasmanian mushroom scavenger hunt. Cheesy, you're with Krista, Sandy, Errol and Travis. Tamor, you're with Uncle Artis, Magda, Dr. Ben, and me. Everyone consult the sheets that Cheesy printed out for you because some of these mushrooms can be extremely toxic. When I think of mushrooms, I think of tens of thousands of microscopic spores pouring down and floating off on the whim of the wind. Pores so small it takes them and thousands of their comrades to cover a pinhead. However, each spore can grow to a network of fine threads or hyphae, allowing the fungi to creep over everything and expand its territory. The hyphae release their chemicals, dissolve its food, and digest the nutrients only to be absorbed by the growing fungus. They become a tangled mat, dissolving and digesting until specialized hyphae sprout black ball-shaped spore cases and a new generation of mold takes to the air. Poof! Dr. Ben, a mushroom aficionado, will be identifying all of our mushrooms. He gave us all a brief pep talk before we started, so I thought I would heed his advice. Fungi are eukaryotic organisms, both multicellular and unicellular, although we'll not be looking for any yeast today. Most fungi are microscopic but produce the visible fruit bodies we call mushrooms. Tamor asked, how do the mushrooms reproduce? And Dr. Ben replied, fungi can reproduce asexually by budding, or it can have fruit bodies that produce spores. Spores are cells that can be adapted for dispersal or survival for extended periods, under disastrous conditions until they can carry their banner forward. If a spore lands where there is moisture and food, it may be able to germinate and produce its own hyphae. As the hyphae branch and grow in all directions from the spore, they form a circle of growth known as a colony. Many fungi need two of these colonies to grow next to each other and to mate before that fungus is able to form any new spores and spread further. Cheesy interjected, like the old computer wargames. Ben continued, hyphae need O2 and produce CO2 like animals. Spores form on special hyphae and are so small that more than 1,000 would fit on a pinhead. Being so small and lightweight, they easily move unseen on the air currents and are spread by the wind. Most spores simply die where they land lacking water and food, but some fungal colonies can grow for a very long time and over very large areas. Perhaps that's the case in Neanderthal, I thought. The spores lead from the glade to Karma's points of destiny. Will any spores and hyphae do, or is it a particular species? That's a problem with our puzzle and each of its pieces. The right tree, the right venom, the right fungus, and what else? Does communication occur by inhaling the spores of the network? Are there any poisonous fungus here, mate? Uncle Artis asked. Whether fungi are poisonous or not is a relative question, Artis, because there are 3 levels of poisonous fungi, ones that will kill you, ones that will make you seriously ill, and ones that will give you hallucinations. The deadliest type would be the Amanita phalloides or death cap, which is responsible for almost all deaths attributable to fungal poisoning around the world. What are the symptoms? I asked. Death is painful and unpleasant, but you must eat these to be poisoned. The ingester will have no symptoms for the first 12 hours, then experience violent stomach pain and gastroenteritis, followed by a healthy bout of vomiting and diarrhea. Sandy said, that sounds like the first time I ate at the Deli Dragon. And we laughed, but my laugh was choked back with a cough because I had eaten with him there that night. All seems well for a couple of days, and just when the ingester feels like they've beaten it and start doing their victory dance, the toxin smashes through their liver and kidneys on its way to a 50% death rate. Sun and Moon, Tamor noted. Should you be fortunate enough to survive, you're likely to have major kidney and liver damage. Therefore, if you learn to identify only one fungus in your life, this is the one. Pictures are in the brochure I gave you. The most common cause of poisoning from wild fungi is the yellow staining mushroom, Agricus xanthodermis, but it doesn't have the completion rate of the death cap. Dr. Ben told us. There are hallucinatory or psychotropic mushrooms here as well. He continued, the most popular mushroom of the magic type is Psilocybe subaeruginosa, also known as golden tops. In Tasmania, some species of genus Galerina bear a striking similarity to genus Psilocybe and occur in similar habitats, increasing the possibility of a fatal psychotropic feast because Galerina have the same kind of toxins as the deadly Amanitas. Galerina is a genus of small brown spore saprobic mushrooms, most noted for toxic species which are occasionally confused with hallucinogenic species of Psilocybe. Galerina var pachyspora has been collected on Macquarie Island, to which Magda added, of course it would be there. There's a fine line between ingesting an amount of mushroom that will produce hallucinations and ingesting an amount that could cause serious organ damage or even death. Psilocybe tasmaniana is a species of coprophilous agaric fungus in the family Hymenogasteraceae known only from Tasmania and southeastern Australia. It's a small tawny orange mushroom, with a slight bluing reaction to damage. This bad boy likes to hang out on dung, which is actually a defining characteristic. How do you know it's magic, mate? Tamor asked. As a bluing member of the genus psilocybe, it contains the psychoactive compounds psilocin and psilocybin, which are hallucinogens that produce effects similar to LSD. They deliver an altered state of consciousness. How long do the effects last? Tamor asked. Effects appear within 15 minutes or so and last 4 to 6 hours based on the strength of the mushroom's toxicity and the amount of psilocybin ingested. There's also a process of curing mushrooms before they are ingested, so don't be grazing on any fresh mushrooms before you bring them back. Travis asked, I've heard there are mushrooms which glow in the dark. Is that true? Quote. Errol added, a 90-minute drive northwest of Hobart, in Mountfield National Park, you'll find a popular spot for nearly 300 species of mushrooms, including the green elf cup, Chlorosiboria aeruginosus, and the yellow Cortinarius sinopicolor that mushroom hunters look for. Dr. Ben added, it takes a little magic of photography and a long exposure until the images of the mushrooms turn a luminescent green. Ghost fungus is the most striking example, but you must have the right camera for it and about 5 minutes of exposure. If I lived in Tasmania, I would have a large mushroom terrarium with lights and cameras focused to capture time-lapse photography. Getting back to the mushrooms at hand, Omphalotus nidiformis is a gilled basidiomycete mushroom most notable for its bioluminescent properties. This species is found primarily in southern Australia and Tasmania, but it has recently been found in India. The fungus is saprotrophic, which means it obtains nutrition from dead and decaying matter as well as parasitic because it depends on other living organisms for its food. It's not known if the mycelium is also luminescent. Mycelium is the network of fungal threads or hyphae grown underground, but can also thrive in other places like rotting tree trunks. A single spore can develop into a mycelium, and a mycelium can develop a mushroom. Pick up your little Goldilocks baskets with your safety gloves, masks and trowels. Then skip along to Grandma's mushroom cupboard. Good luck and watch out for snakes. That day we climbed over trees, poked under bushes with sticks, and flipped rocks over until finally, by the time the sun was showing signs of going down, we had filled our basket. There must have been 30 different species, including some Dr. Ben was hoping we would find. I wasn't even sure what the rules of the contest were to know whether or not we had won. I didn't really care by the time we made it back to camp because it was exhausting work and we had actually seen 5 snakes that day. Snakes like rivers, at least that's what I think I learned that day. Dinner was a group effort mostly because everyone was so hungry from the day's physical work they couldn't wait. Dr. Ben was sorting through the mushrooms and making sample bags. Are those the samples for Florin, Dr. Benby? Krista asked and Ben replied, yes. We have some really nice ones he was only hoping to get. He should be quite happy to add these to his fungi inventory. There are thousands upon thousands of species of fungi, and Florin told me that the alchemists from the 1500s knew the bad mushrooms much better than they knew the good ones. I think alchemists earned more than chefs in those days. Surely chemists earn more than chefs today. Toxins, poisons, bacteria, pheromones, or any of that kind of stuff brings a glimmer to Florin's eye. He has so many secret recipes and formulas that you never know what he can come up with when he wants to. Know a man to trifle with or get his dander up. While setting up for the campfire, Travis asked Dr. Ben, what's the DNA story in a nutshell? The central dogma is the basis of all genetics and the key to the study of molecular genetics. It states that DNA replicates itself, DNA is transcribed into RNA, and RNA is translated into proteins. Along with the central dogma, the genetic code is used to understand how RNA is translated into proteins to start building anything and everything. Don't stop there, Dr. Ben. Finish your thought, I said, because I could see he wanted to complicate it up a bit but didn't want to offend Travis. Replication of DNA and the transcription of DNA to mRNA or the messenger molecules occurs in the mitochondria, while translation from RNA to proteins occurs in the ribosome. The ribosome is a complex molecule made of ribosomal RNA molecules and proteins to form a factory for protein synthesis in cells. The ribosome is responsible for translating encoded messages from messenger RNA molecules to synthesize proteins from amino acids. They're building a recipe, Dr. Ben told us. Cheesy added, I is being used to determine how proteins are folded during that process to achieve the final shape they require. 2 programs are now available in free source. An artificial intelligence network developed by Google AI offshoot DeepMind has made progress in determining a protein's 3D shape from its amino acid sequence and opened it up to free source, which means they're sharing their software coding. AlphaFold has also jumped into the fray and released their software in free source. This is an area we're thinking about exploring with our new company. Combine DNA and AI for both our doctorates and business to expand our research. Protein folding is essential. If there's anything we don't see in redundancy, it's the need for specific proteins. These are all valid topics for Dr. Sue and I at Windhaven. Dr. Sue has a couple doctorate students coming out later in the year. Dr. Ben told us. We sat around the fire eating our evening meal when Krista announced, Travis went back to Halls Falls on Groom River near the trailhead and picked up the 2 cameras he set out. You're not going to believe what he got. Excited, we all gathered around the laptop and waited while he set up the video. I've seen this twice only because I couldn't believe it when I looked at it in the truck the first time. One camera points east and the other points west, and they're hanging from the bottom of a bridge. The first video was an infrared video looking downriver from about 5 meters above. The night was clear, and the camera resolution was nice, but it was still a little dark at the further range. There was some humming and hawing, but Travis encouraged us, just wait. The animal was coming closer to the camera and a couple other shapes appeared behind it. When the animal was about 5 meters away, it turned sideways, and the stripes were obvious, as was the elongated snout and the ridged kangaroo-like tail. A cheer went up that could probably be heard across half of Tasmania. That's it, Travis. Krista shouted, and everyone began slapping each other on the back. Uncle Artis said less than most. He was obviously pleased with the video, but I think he realized it was just another piece of evidence that people were going to debate. In reality, the only thing that changed was that we were now confirmed believers because we believe what we saw was a tiger family. We could even go back and get some prints, but again it would just be debated for the next 5 years, or at least until this particular Tasmanian tiger's grandpups grow up and move away with no forwarding address. If we're going to revive the Tasmanian tiger from a running start, then we need a sample of its DNA. That would give us the full genome rather than a sequenced genome from fragmented historical data. If the university had such a sample, would it impact their decision on whether or not to clone the thylacine? That's precisely the question we don't want to take 5 years to debate, because we know what our answer is now. Let's do it, and everyone again gave a rousing cheer, and especially Uncle Artis this time. We should keep this video in our own archives for the time being. More importantly, we know the exact spot to leave them alone for now. Uncle Artis suggested. Magda asked, with a blood sample we could clone babies in a surrogate mother, right? To which I nodded in the affirmative. She and Krista let out a joint coordinated shout that woke every thylacine in the neighborhood. Everything in this forest knew we were there that night. We enjoyed a sing-along campfire, and Uncle Artis kept us locked and loaded with cold brews as we celebrated the night away. To be so lucky as to find a thylacine on our first visit to Tasmania was too much of a coincidence to me. Magda told me she felt the same thing and said we must look at the painting Andrew gave us. Who or what is manipulating our destiny? She asked me, and I felt my hand slip to my necklace. The discussions were all about tigers and devils that night. I knew we were jumping the gun somewhat, but ultimately, they wouldn't be disappointed. As Errol often says, failure is not an option, and then he does it. Later we watched some devils attracted by the food Timor had left out for them. It was funny watching them fight back and forth for the choice bits, but they eventually settled for anything rather than nothing. 2 sets of 3 moved through over the night, and none of them exhibited tumors. We packed up in the morning to move our camp west. The days had been in the mid-60s Fahrenheit, but the nights down to 40, so bundling up at night was important at this time of year. After all, it's winter here. Our next major destinations were the walls of Jerusalem and Cradle Mountain, but we had an astounding scenic drive before we reached them. With no roads within the walls of Jerusalem National Park, our gear needed to be backpacked to the campsite according to Travis. The start of the main access track into the walls of Jerusalem by vehicle was Lake Roallan, on Mole Creek, off the Mersey Forest Road. Our trek to get there led us through Branksome, a scenic farming town on the Ringarooma River, providing some of the hops needed for Uncle's Artis and Arthur's beer supply. The city of Launceston, famous for the Cataract Gorge, panoramic views, walking trails, sculpted gardens, and a chairlift. According to Cheesy, who was reading off the internet, that led us into the vinelands of the Tamar Valley stretching northwest along the Tamar River. We paused at Lobster Falls to hike the 4 kms to the falls, which were not particularly spectacular, but the hike was needed for us to get our legs working for the day. Mole Creek, a town in the upper Mersey Valley, was famous for honey, which was a big deal in this area. Unique bees and unique flowers make unique honey. Ben acquired some to run it through a spectrograph back at Windhaven. Timor told us, the earliest archaeological evidence for Aboriginal habitation of Tasmania is from the valley of the Forth River, 35,000 years ago. How does that line up with Aboriginals crossing from Australia at 10,000 years ago over the Bass Strait? How do you know it was 35,000 years? Dr. Ben asked. When I came back to Tas, my grandmother's ancestors told me the fathers arrived 40,000 years ago and were cut off from the mainland by rising sea levels in 6000 BC. They were entirely isolated from the rest of the human species for 8,000 years until European contact. Granny's friends say Tasmanian decimation qualifies as genocide in terms of the definition set forth by the UN Genocide Convention. Nothing is known of specific sites, but the Palawa say there is something important in the Cataract Gorge. These are lands of the Palatora tribe. Their range included Deloraine, the face of the Great Western Tiers, and the Gog Mountains north of Mole Creek where they mined ochre in the Toowoomba ochre pits. Tamor told us. Travis added, there is evidence that they've been settled in the Mole Creek area for at least 10,000 years. The caves of Mole Creek Karst National Park include Maricopa Cave and King Solomon's Cave. Finding a cave with ancient drawings before 10,000 years ago would lift my granny's heart. Mavis and her husband have always been interested in their roots and they've told Mary and I some of the stories they learned as children. Uncle Artis said. One of their creation myths refers to two creator deities, Moini and Dromedine, the children of Parnuin, the sun, and Vina, the moon. I don't know it like one of Sandy's tales, but I can tell you what I remember. Moini was the primeval creator, forming the land and rivers and making first man, Palvar, from a spirit residing in the ground. I think Palvar was supposed to look like a kangaroo, so that's why you see kangaroo totems. Moini then created the kangaroo, who emerged, like the first man, from the soil. Travis said, yup, that's what Granny tells us, but I have heard that Dromedine appears as the star Canopus and helped the first men to change from their kangaroo-like form. He removed their tails and fashioned their knee joints so that they could rest, and thus man is different from kangaroo. Let's see if we can dial Mavis and Gregory into the campfire tonight. I suggested. Tamor said, Granny would love that, but she'll have to go to Mary's house. And Uncle Artis said, leave it with me, mate. We had a quick discussion and decided to stop here for a day or two to explore the caves and this general area next to the national park. The caves were of special interest to Sandy and the Aboriginal timeline was something Dr. Ben wanted to explore. Travis arranged a local area for us for a couple days and we set up camp early. The walk to the wall was very organized and formal, as were all of the treks in the national park system in Tasmania, it seemed, so we decided to skip the park tours. Cheesy and Krista set out to distribute the cameras for the night while the rest of us got camp ready so we could explore the Maricopa Cave, just down the trail from our camp location. Mole Creek has tigers, Travis stated very matter-of-factly. The Maricopa Cave was dazzling with its sparkling crystals, reflection pools, stalactites, and stalagmites soaking up the silence of abandoned river passages for a millennium. This was not the type of cave Sandy and Dr. Ben had in mind based on Travis' 35,000-year claim, but it was nonetheless stunning and ancient from a geological sense. Cheesy snapped a million pictures of the cascading streams of stalactites. I'm fascinated by the patterns of the millions of drips happening all at once, just in such slow motion. We have no idea where they're all going, Cheesy said. This was a wet cave, so it felt like things were in motion even though they hadn't moved an inch in decades. This would have made a great spooky cave environment for the Mayans, Aztecs, or Incas, especially with some Tasmanian mushrooms thrown into the mix. Great crowd control, I'd be a believer. With extra time we decided to visit King Solomon's Cave as well. It was a dry cave only 25 kilometers west of Mole Creek and was reputed to be the home of the Tasmanian cave spider. A separate cave, known as the Queen of Sheba Cave, was adjacent to King Solomon's Cave. Dr. Ben told us, the Tasmanian cave spider is the last of the Gondwanan spiders and its nearest relatives are found in South America. It weaves a web more than a meter across. These spiders retain the primitive pattern of 4 abdominal breathing organs, called book lungs. Whether or not they are venomous to any degree is unknown. It's amazing how when this area was attached to South America it was Gondwana. Then before moving away from India it was Pangaea. Then it moved away from Australia. Each time it kept a little something as it departed, Sandy said. The weather was beginning to change so we decided to head back to camp. It rained while we prepared dinner, but stopped by the time we actually sat down to eat, so the boys got a rousing fire going to help dry us off. The flashcards had been retrieved from a couple of cameras and Cheesy's cameras were in position for the late show starring paddy melons, devils, wallabies, and various types of calls. Uncle Artis had arranged for Mary, Mavis, and Gregory to join in from Mary's house, and Uncle Arthur was also tuned in requesting another waltzing Matilda so he could record it this time. Magda and Krista complied with Uncle Arthur's request and dedicated the song to him so he could record it and show it to all his buddies. I'm sure a glow appeared around his image in the video because he was beaming. Travis and Tamor joined Magda and Krista for the next song. This one is for you, Granny. In Tasmania, if you are Aboriginal, then you know the songs of Mrs. Fanny Cochran Smith. Now there are also 2 Moldavian girls that know at least one of her songs. And everyone laughed and settled in to listen as they began to play their version of a traditional Aboriginal song. Mavis and Gregory were obviously pleased with the song and applauded all the way through it. Oh, Travis, Timur, girls, it was so beautiful. Not like when I was a girl, but beautiful. And everyone laughed before Mavis went on to say, thank you so much for that. It was spot on. Good on ya boys, Gregory added. Uncle Artis told them, the boys were telling us a bit of a story around Moyni and Dromedine and we kinda figured you might have a thing or two to add, Gregory. Ya come to da right place, mate. There aren't many of us left from days when traditions were day-to-day life. Gregory told us. Moyni fought his brother Dromedine, and many devils because Dromedine changed the shape of man. Moyni was hurled to death from the sky to take the form of a big stone at Cock's Bight, just down on the southwest coast. Dromedine fell at Louisa Bay just further down from where Mary said you are. Mavis added, 2G Low or what's known as Port Davy is just north of there and is where the devils live. The area has valleys and caves, inhabited by spiritual sprites. Some clans create animal spirits from trees to aid their way in the physical world. Devils walk alongside people carrying a torch but remaining unseen. These made me think of Dr. Emily's people immediately. The torch or light was significant. Life force. Travis said, Manalajena described talking to his devil as a personal spirituality that provided all-seeing powers. Timur added, the prime badass was a dude named Rajarappa. A large black man associated with darkness and born on a strong wind. And he followed it with a Marvel Comics move. Gregory added, a devil may be the source of a severe illness, so by cutting the skin, the evil spirit is released. There are many spirits in DA world. A creator spirit called Tigana Marabona is Twilight Man. Nama Barag is the ghost of the thunderstorm and Ragi Roba is the revered spirit. Mavis added, Laga Robana, the awful spirit of the dead or Mayan Ginja the killer or bringer of death. There were many. Timur couldn't stop and came back with Moran Bagana Lawana or the bright spirit of the night. She was good for dreams because she was kind and friendly. Travis told us, Mom used to tell us of Warawana, the spirit being balanced or Warawa, spirit of dead because they were both associated with celestial bodies. She would point to the sky when she would tell us about them, but it was always a different part of the sky. I guess they were free-range celestial bodies. Timur poked Travis and said, don't forget Badenala, the shadow man Travis. We looked for him lots of nights along with Karnatana the bone man. We set traps for them, waited out all night and even had a bunch of other kids helping us trap them. Mavis said, you should have been chasing Nanginas, the ghost fairies and elves. Where did the dead go, Gregory? Dr. Ben asked. The spirit of the dead traveled to Da place over the sea far north over west, called Muai. The island of the dead, Tini Drini, was described as an island in Bass Strait. The dead jump up white men, he finished. When Mavis saw the look on people's faces, she interpreted, jump up white men refers to the aboriginal skeleton of the reborn which would have been white. Timur added, phantasmic returned dead. Gregory told us, tribes differ on these customs. Dead might be cremated or put in a hollow tree or a rock grave. Different clans, different customs. Mavis said, fathers kept the bones of ancestors for talismans and amulets. Bones could be worn on a kangaroo sinew or kept in a kangaroo skin bag. Travis told us, the most enduring petroglyphs, or rock art is at Premingana on the west coast. The Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery had to apologize for taking the 14,000-year-old petroglyphs from Premingana home to Hobart and so finally returned it. Dr. Ben said, where did they get the 14,000 date from? Something carbon dated. But no one had the answer. We continued to talk for another half hour before our guests all signed off. As we sat around the fire with an eye on the cameras, we discussed where we wanted to go the next day and decided to follow the Mersey Forest Road to Lake Roallan where Travis thought he could arrange boats for us with a friend of his over the internet. The next morning, we had a quick breakfast, then broke down camp to move on. There was no time for yoga as we had to reach the lake to meet our boats. Travis' friends were waiting for us when we got to the lake and we loaded our gear onto the boats and left our vehicles behind. We were going to set up a base camp and then explore areas of interest in smaller groups either on the lake or deeper into the park. Cheesy had an awesome drone he called the Eye that he wanted to use to capture some of the natural formations we would be seeing. Although flying a drone was not allowed by Tasmanian lands and forest, they seemed ill-positioned to point fingers at people or animals. Cheesy flew his drone with responsibility and should it have crashed we would have retrieved it. We took our time traveling the length of Lake Roallan, enjoying the unique scenery and habitats, so it was late afternoon by the time we found a suitable location for our first camp. Travis had to remove 2 tiger snakes before we could set up anything. He said the tiger snakes there were very black in color and quite large, which set the right tone for the walking adventure we were about to have over the next few days. The area featured alpine lakes, 1,000-year-old pencil pine forests and glorious dolerite peaks. Raised boards are a rare geological feature that protect unique alpine vegetation anywhere from grasslands, rocky earth, and even marsh. It's like having a terrarium with levels. The animals were prolific in that area and obviously benefited from the design. The Bennett's wallaby, not to be confused with the kangaroo, is a smaller 1.5 meters tall, black-nosed, white-striped lipped, black-pawed marsupial. Very formal-looking, dressed for dinner, or as Cheesy named him, the Chippendale wallaby. Travis pointed out spotted wombats, paddymelons, quolls, possums, and the ever-charming Tasmanian devils seemed to pop up everywhere in this domain. Over the next few days, we saw Mount Jerusalem, the Temple, and Solomon's Throne. The landmarks were named for their resemblance to the city walls in Jerusalem apparently. Biblical names were given to the peaks, glacier lakes and plateaus within the park, including Solomon Jewels, Pool of Bethesda, Herods, and Damascus Gates. Cheesy was able to get some amazing aerial views in 4K that we rewatched over and over. The Jacks and Lance would love to climb those cliffs, eh? Cheesy said to me, and I had to agree. April and Alexi as well. King David's Peak dominated the park with a summit height of almost 1,500 meters, providing an amazing view over the area, and was one climb we all made together along Wild Dog Creek. Every night before the campfire, the boys put out the cameras in different spots. The spot they picked that night was from a bridge location looking down both sides of the river just as they set up on the Halls Falls viewing. Everyone was optimistic because many of the other travelers we met were also keeping an eye out for tigers. It wasn't long after the sun set before the motion detector started clicking the camera lens. It was a high-traffic area, but there was nothing that looked like our thylacine. Cheesy and Travis decided to leave the cameras set up there while we went for a 4-day trek to Cradle Mountain. We found a nice sunny glade in the forest to lay out our yoga mats in the morning and had a group session before we moved on. Sandy had been teaching us some new positions he learned from a local guru at home. That environment had a calmness about it that made one think things take time and no one should be in a hurry. The terrain changed constantly in that area, bringing new environments with each. There could be thousands of unique organisms here that we don't know about and probably never will, Dr. Ben suggested. Cradle Mountain exhibited rugged beauty from its moss-covered rainforests and deep river gorges to snow-covered peaks at that time of year. I recognized alpine moorlands and glacial lakes from my childhood and witnessed some breathtaking landscapes I had only imagined in computer environments. The deciduous fagus tree was a tree I wanted a sample from. Magda helped me collect some core samples from the fagus and other local trees. The tool I brought was a lot bigger than the tool we used in Romania, but so are the trees. Not that it was my intention to core the biggest trees, but I did want to go back more than 100 years on at least one of each. One tree I'd been looking forward to sampling was the Huon pine, an iconic tree. The Huon pine is one of the slowest growing and longest living plants on Earth, but I thought we may have to travel further west still to find their habitat. Like the tiger, they were hunted down by the early Europeans and harvested. We decided to pull up stakes and return to Hobart for a few days before everyone had to return home. The journey had always had a flexible schedule and we had left enough on the end of our journey to leave our guests wanting. Our path took us along Oliver's Road, where we stopped at an amazing lookout just before joining the Sathana Road, which wound through the rugged environment and thick forest before eventually reaching the dam on the Forth River. The lower part of the river is a major venue for competitive rowing. The river is a part of the Mersey Forth Power Project, which includes 7 hydroelectric power stations. That breaks up the wilderness a bit. We took Cradle Mountain Road through Middlesex to the Beaver Road, which took us to the Murchison Highway. The Vale River here, the Kew River there, everywhere a river or a lake for that matter. Lake McIntosh, Lake Rosebery and all the other lakes that dot the area from Black Buff Lookout. We took Anthony Road along Lake Plimsoll, a very large lake the road hugged. Lake Newton was next and was very long, but Uncle Artis said it was much smaller than Plimsoll. Both were good fishing spots for Uncle Artis and his mates. He much preferred freshwater fishing to saltwater fishing, he confided in me. Prospecting and fossicking are great Tasmanian hobbies too, Uncle Artis told us. We've got so many rich deposits and unique mineral formations that collecting samples of natural minerals can be very profitable. Prospecting is licensed and defined by the government as exploring for minerals to a depth less than 2 meters below the surface of the Earth, or of any pre-existing excavation, by means of handheld instruments including the use of metal detectors. As long as you follow those rules you're good to go and it's finders keepers. But you cannot sell the gold you find because it belongs to the Queen. Tassie prospectors have bags of gold they cannot sell or donate for tax purposes. They do it for the love of the Tassie outdoors. We have a couple of them on our tiger tracking team. Fossicking is different than prospecting because you don't need a license if you go to one of the government areas, but you can't use metal detectors either. I put a high-grade metal detector in the kit of each vehicle. It's a good item to have on the road. We turned onto the Zion Road to make our way towards Queenstown, which was the terminus of the West Coast Wilderness Railway that travelled southwards alongside the Queen River and along the northern slopes of the King River to the port of Strawn on Macquarie Harbour. That's not somewhere we wanted to go at this time, but perhaps we'll find our way back to the harbour in the future. It was time now to return to Hobart while we still had a few days to see the sights around town before Magda, Krista, Dr. Ben, and Sandy had to return to their homes. We followed the Lyle Hoy for quite some time to the northern stretches of the Derwent River. I wondered if we could get by boat from here to Hobart, but Errol was not sure whether it was blocked anywhere along the way or not. Dams were prevalent in this part of the country. The Lyle Hoy passed through Bronte Park, Rady's Lake and Lake Binney. I must have fallen asleep briefly because we were at the Gordon River Road when I woke, on the shores of River Derwent. We continued on the Lyle Hoy through New Norfolk following the River Derwent all the way back into Hobart. When we pulled up at Mary's house, she was waiting on the porch waving at us. Eventually the lineups for the 2 showers in the house dwindled as Cheesy and I got ours last. By the time we finished, everyone was sitting down to dinner and talking about the trip. Errol said we had to visit Salamanca Place, the home of the cultural scene in Hobart, before everyone leaves. Warehouses have become art galleries, theatres, cafes, and bars. A trip downtown with the girls generally ended up on a bridge looking into the water below. They were far more interested in the wildlife than the nightlife. Errol and I considered many different topics for our PhD programs and wanted to take advantage of the fact that Dr. Ben was here to give us some insight. We talked about various branches of genetics like cytogenetics, which was the study of the structure and function of the cell, especially the chromosomes. But that type of analysis didn't appeal to us more than other things did. That was part of the problem, too many choices. Karyotypes describe the number of chromosomes, and what they look like under a light microscope. Their length, the position of the centromeres, banding pattern, differences between the sex chromosomes, and any other physical characteristics. Karyotyping uses a system of studying chromosomes to identify genetic abnormalities and evolutionary changes that happened in the past. This would probably be an easy opportunity for us to complete our PhD requirements and perhaps earn fees from the public as a lab, but again, the topic didn't jump out at us. Dr. Ben told us, a DNA microarray is a collection of microscopic DNA spots attached to a solid surface. DNA microarrays measure the expression levels of large numbers of genes simultaneously or to genotype multiple regions of a genome. When a gene is expressed in a cell, it generates messenger RNA, mRNA. Overexpressed genes generate more mRNA than underexpressed genes. This information can be detected on the microarray. Since an array can contain tens of thousands of probes, a microarray experiment can accomplish many genetic tests in parallel. Arrays have dramatically accelerated many types of investigations. Personally, I think that would be an excellent thesis project and a project earner in the lab. Errol said, the polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, is a biochemical technology to amplify a single or a few copies of a piece of DNA across several orders of magnitude, generating thousands to millions of copies of a particular DNA sequence. PCR is now a common and often indispensable technique used in medical and biological research labs for a variety of applications. That included DNA cloning for sequencing, DNA-based phylogeny, or functional analysis of genes, the diagnosis of hereditary diseases, the identification of genetic fingerprints that's used in forensic sciences and paternity testing, and the detection and diagnosis of infectious diseases. These could all be business opportunities. After discussing our plans for opening the lab for business opportunities and running our 3 individual PhD projects with Dr. Ben, we decided to focus on polymerase chain reaction and DNA microarrays. Both of those technologies also fit our desire to help the tiger and the devil. It was promising to be a grand first year in Tassie. However, it was a sad trip to the airport to see Magda, Krista, Dr. Ben, and Sandy off. The girls were returning to Castle Sel Tradet, Dr. Ben was on his way back to Africa, and Sandy was meeting Uncle Sandu at the Salton Sea. Mary, Uncle Artis, and even Uncle Arthur were there to say their goodbyes as well. The girls, Dr. Ben and Sandy, had stopped at the chocolatier in town and loaded up with gifts for the 3 of them. The next several months were busy getting our business set up in Hobart and our projects underway. Errol and I were looking for some property that would allow us to build a laboratory office building as well as have space for us to build living accommodations. We asked Uncle Artis to find a couple acres with good frontage on the River Derwent so we could access the marine part of our environment. Uncle Artis was also looking into acquiring the property where Travis and Timur saw the tiger. He's having trouble tracking down the owner to see if they even want to sell. I received a call from Ian late one night and he linked Cheesy into the call. Cheesy happened to be down the hall, so we met in the den to take the call together. We always said we wanted to be the type of people who not only wanted to change the world, but were capable of changing the world for the better for all. Do you remember that? He asked, and we both admitted we did. Well, I'm going to give you a chance to change the world for the better. Are you willing to take it? Ian went on to outline a plan to create a group of people he referred to as the Pendulum Group. From the few details he revealed over the phone, Cheesy and I were intrigued by the scope of this plan but curious about so many details. Details were being sent by courier, so he gave us very little information, including whom he was recruiting. When the package arrived, it was an invite to a New Year's Eve event at Castle Tradit. Airline tickets were included and booked for a 3-day stay. I had spoken to Ian on Errol's behalf and Cheesy confirmed that he would be a valued addition to recruit, so Ian acquiesced. I knew from the invite what the meeting was really about, but I didn't know who was going to be in attendance, and it was not the kind of thing I could research. Since it was in Moldavia, I could only assume the Jacks were on board. But what about Uncle Sandu and the Baroness? What about Darla, Magda, and Krista? What about Florin? Who else would have received invites? I could have contacted people and asked, but that would probably not be the best approach if they were not included. Dick, on the other hand, may have had ethical issues because of his military career. That could also impact Dr. Sue and even Dr. Ben perhaps. For that matter, what about Wham, Jeffrey and Jay? I thought Sandy was a no-brainer, but for some reason I didn't call him and he didn't call me or Cheesy either. As time drew near, Cheesy had worked Errol up to a froth of excitement at the expectation of visiting Castle Tradit. One minute he's feeding him stories of vampires and in the next breath it's werewolves. Errol had never experienced this type of environment and was in awe of most things he saw along the way. We arrived at Bucharest's Henry Coandă International Airport and continued on to Suceava's Stefan cel Mare International Airport, then made our way to the most convenient bench with a view of the entrance. A young man was performing tricks for a couple of travelers on the next bench. Just when I was thinking he was quite good, a feeling of déjà vu came over me. This was the same fellow I saw the last time I was here. When he nodded and winked at me, I felt the shiver again. I was back in Moldavia, I thought. When the automatic doors opened at the entrance and a raven flew in, I knew Krista was here. Sure enough, she strolled in behind Thief, creating a bit of a spectacle, and waved at us to come with her to the limousine. It was great to see Krista again, and she filled us in on what the girls had been doing since we last saw them. Errol caught her up to date with us. The trip through the Carpathian Mountains created the perfect environment for Cheesy to tease Errol relentlessly. Don't worry, Errol, if the vampires come, I will save you, and if the werewolves come, Magda will save you. We'll let them eat Gordon. Gordon. His name is Gordon. Ha! Errol exclaimed, much to Cheesy's chagrin. When the limo cleared the forest and Errol got his first look at Castle Tradit, he let out an audible gasp and said, "You didn't do it justice, Cheesy." The limo pulled up at the entrance and we stepped into a hive of activity, but I didn't recognize any of the busy bees buzzing around me. Krista bid us farewell as she had to return to the airport to pick up more of Ian's guests. That statement told me she knew why we were here and was to be part of the Pendulum. I was escorted to my room, which was the same room I had the last time I was here. At the time I thought it was a coincidence, but later Marius explained to me I was given the same room so that I would come to think of it as a home. Psychosomatic. You're a biologist. We're just planting thoughts. It was still just the day before New Year's Eve and early evening, so Cheesy and I decided to take Errol down to the lounge for a few exotic beverages and some introductions if any of our friends had arrived yet. Errol's head was on a swivel all the way to the lounge. So much to see. Can I wander around the halls all night? Would that be weird? Errol asked. Yeah, sure, try the basement tour. It's pretty nice in the middle of the night. Take a candle and a beer, a real Aussie wouldn't need anything more. And we laughed. He'd need a bucket, Errol replied. Marius and Marion were both in the lounge waiting for us to come down once we were settled in. They had just flown in from the Salton Sea and had tons of updates for us that they would tell about later when the rest of the crew arrived. We introduced him to Errol, whom they had never met, but had heard a lot about. I asked Marius who was coming for New Year's, but he was not totally sure. This is Ian's party. Did Darla take the same flight as you guys? Cheesy asked the Jacks, who looked at each other sheepishly but didn't reply. Come on, she was on that flight. I talked to her this morning, so don't mess with me. And then they laughed and said, yes, Cheesy, she's here. As we sat, we talked, we drank, we ate, we laughed, we welcomed new arrivals, we had a blast. Ian was next to make an appearance and arrived to a rousing cheer. This was another introduction for Errol, who was beginning to feel a bit out of his depth. I assured him that he just had to relax and coast into this group because they would adopt him. He did, and they did. We heard Sandy, Dr. Sue, and Dr. Ben had arrived, but were just in the midst of getting settled in. The girls were finished with their limo hosting trips for the night as everyone who was due that day was there. A huge cheer went up when they entered the lounge with their menagerie. Magda and Krista brought Darla over to meet Errol in their usual fashion. By the time they were finished, Errol had to sit down. He was weak in the knees. "Don't worry, Errol, there aren't many on the planet that can withstand a barrage from the cell-traded sirens," I assured him. The next morning, after a delightful breakfast, I joined a rather large group meditating on the terrace in an area that was sheltered from the wind and directly in the glory of the sun on an otherwise brisk morning in the Carpathians. I found a spot next to Sandy and Dr. Sue and rolled out my mat. I was hoping to get an opportunity to ask Dr. Sue whether or not Dick was coming, and when I did finally ask, she replied, "He would like to be with us, but his military oaths prohibit his direct involvement. Think we have to just continue as always, but be aware that he may not be in it for the duration." Having a few hours to myself, I met up with Magda and we took a hike in the forest inhaling the brisk winter air. Deciduous trees create a much different forest in the winter than they do in the summer. Magda pointed out various animal trails left in the snow. Snowshoe rabbit, weasel, followed by wolves. "Will you be attending Ian's meeting tonight?" I asked, and she replied, "I will. I perhaps know a little more about what's happening than you do at this particular moment because I've been privy to meetings my mother has had with Ian. You must realize that I cannot betray that confidence even to you." What she didn't realize was that Ian had told me some details of their meetings, but perhaps not all. Geraldine Sell-Traded had an experience with a gypsy when she was a young mother. The gypsy predicted that her children would help to usher in a new world and that her father would be assassinated by the end of that very same day. She was right about Baroness Geraldine's father because she was the assassin. Fine, but what do you think of Ian's plans for the Pendulum Group? He wants to bring about some significant change that will benefit the Earth and all its inhabitants, but he may also violate laws, church doctrines and people's beliefs. What do you think of that? I asked. I think the question is twofold. She said, should we do it and can we do it? Should we do it is based on us being able to interpret what is the correct choice for our perception of Dharma. Everyone who is committed to something thinks they're in the right or just position. They cannot all be right and just. Can we do it? Most times I can't swing a cat without hitting a genius doctor or two. What they can't do, the Sell-Tradeds can. Later in the day, Magda and I had an early dinner with Cheesy and Darla and awaited any new arrivals. Cheesy had heard from Sandy that Rick had arrived. He was still living at Ian's house in Nainital and apparently had some new information on the search for the diaries. A little later, Dr. Ben came to the cafeteria accompanied by Dr. Sue, Dr. Emily and Big Wham. We drew up a bunch of tables, gave the introductions and began to chatter like a prairie dog colony. Eventually we all had to retire to our rooms to get ready for the Black Tie Fair that night. At that point all I knew was that it began at 9 p.m. in the main ballroom. I met Errol and Cheesy at 8:45 at the top of the east stairway, a common mingling spot before descending down the stairway to the ballroom doorway. Descending the stairway, our eyes met the sight of Darla, Magda and Krista dressed to the nines and waiting to escort us in. Either Errol was practicing his dance moves or he became weak in the knees, I'm not sure. They took our arms and we entered the ballroom where the Baroness was welcoming the guests together with Ian. In the receiving line was Uncle Sandu and the now super famous One-Eyed Jacks. Since opening in Las Vegas they had become the toast of the town. We found the table the girls had reserved for us and began to celebrate like a new beginning was on the horizon. Errol was finally doing his share of relaxing and coming out of his shell just as Dr. Sue seemed to be doing. I don't know how many people were at that party, but many of them I didn't recognize and I began to wonder who was here and who these other people were. At about 11 o'clock Magda came up to me and said, "Come with me." I followed her down the hall and then up a staircase to the second floor. We continued down the corridor where we were joined by Cheesy and Darla and Errol and Krista. We then went up another staircase to the third floor and then I knew where we were going, to various Sell-Traded study. The doorway opened to a room right out of a supervillain comic book and I watched for the expression on Errol's face when he saw the full extent of it. With windows 4 meters high and 8 meters across, the view was panoramic and I heard his breath escape. A full moon and a clear sky are good omens for a new beginning. Magda said and I replied, sent by via. Cheesy leaned over to Errol to tell him, this is a great night for vampires. As people gathered in the room, I recognized everyone who was there and those that were conspicuous by their absence. The Sell-Tradeds were extremely well represented by the Baroness, Uncle Sandu and Aunt Alexandria, the Jacks, Darla, Magda and Krista, Florin, Alexei, and April. I wondered if General Alexei Anapov had the same commitment issue as Dick. The Windhaven crew included Dr. Ben, Dr. Sue, Dr. Emily and Big Wham. I couldn't believe Jay was not part of the group, and then Sandy told me she was committed to the group, but would not fly or leave Kenya, and Jeffrey and Kim gave their proxies to Big Wham, but had to stay behind. Sandy and Rick were both currently living in India, but Sandy had been traveling a lot in the US. Then the biggest shock of all came through the door. It was Carl. He was not only involved, but he was sitting on the dais with Baroness Geraldine and Ian. It seemed we were now all gathered. Baroness Geraldine Sel-Tradit stood to begin to speak, and the room went silent. I've known kings and queens, emperors and empresses, tsars and tsarinas, princes and princesses, barons and baronesses, dukes and duchesses, counts and countesses, maharajas and maharanis, sultans and sultanas. Not a backbone or spine among them. Feeble and unmotivated, although some are genially kind or compassionate people unable to muster the gumption or the brains to do anything about it. Are they going to change the world? Not for the better. I've known popes, archbishops, bishops, cardinals, priests, ministers, ayatollahs, and rabbis. They rape and pillage their believers to purchase their golden icons, and they bring death and destruction to the non-believers. Are they going to change the world? Perhaps, but not to the benefit of all. Maybe I needed to meet the Dalai Lama, the Buddha, or the Mahdi. I've known presidents, prime ministers, dictators, chancellors, and premiers. They're all motivated by self-interest, care only about their voters, and getting credit for any improvement that may have accidentally happened during their tenure. Are they going to change the world? The only ones who've tried are revered as the worst criminals in history. I've known Nobel laureates, professors, academics, scientists, and even the odd genius. If there isn't a book or article to be published with their name on it, or a grant that provides them wealth for life whether they accomplish anything or not, then they're not interested. Are they going to change the world? No, but hopefully they don't deter any they come in contact with from doing so. I've known CEOs, CFOs, presidents, chairmen of the board, and directors. I hold some of these titles myself, so I should be careful what I say about this group. There are few people in this group who are not beholden to their shareholders and the almighty stock price. They are committed to doing what is right for their share price. There are a few with controlling interest in mega worldwide companies or stashes to rival Aladdin's treasure. Generally, they have egos bigger than their bank balances, which eventually evaporate. Some of these life forms may actually make a difference, but none of them have the scope to lead changes required by our societies today. I may belong to one or more of those categories I've described, but I want to be known as someone who helped empower youth to change the world for the better. I want my children to be people who had the opportunity to change the world. I know they are each capable in their very own unique ways. I want the young and the experienced to work together to create a world where human dignity is the right of everyone born into it. A year ago, I met Ian and some of his group of friends. I thought to myself at the time, the future begins now. And with that a huge cheer went up from those of us gathered in the room. I hated to draw the parallel to a political gathering, but that shiver felt different. Then Ian stood and took the podium to speak. A baby born in the developed world has a 96.2% chance of surviving. A baby born in the underdeveloped world has a 13.7% chance of surviving. A baby born in our world should have the same chance as any other wherever they are born. A pipe dream. A baby born in the developed world has a 99% chance to have access to drinkable water. A baby born in the underdeveloped world has a 9.2% of having access to any water within 5 kilometers of where they live. A baby born in our world should have the same chance as any other to access water, food, and the nutrition they need. A baby born in the developed world has a 52.3% chance of getting a post-secondary education. A baby born in the underdeveloped world will be lucky to see a single day of school. A baby born in our world should have the opportunity to achieve their potential, whatever it is. A baby born in the developed world has a 63.2% chance of reaching the age of 50. A baby born in the underdeveloped has a 63.2% chance of reaching the age of 20. A baby born in our world should reach 50 in as good health as their DNA supports. A baby born in the developed world has a 37.8% chance of reaching the age of retirement and receiving a pension. A baby born in the underdeveloped world will never retire from trying to feed themselves and wouldn't understand the concept of a pension. A baby born in our world should always remain a productive part of society, and society will always provide for their needs. A baby born in the developed world currently has a 4.3% chance to become a centenarian, and that's expected to climb. A baby born in the underdeveloped world may have a fluke chance of becoming an outlier, as Cheesy would say, the exception to the rule. All pipe dreams. A baby born in our world will look forward to a life of longevity, health, and self-actualization. Who knows, they may be the first people to live forever. I would ask all of you present here tonight, and those of you who are here in our thoughts, to raise your glasses in a pledge to restore the pendulum of human equality to its equilibrium. And our glasses clinked as the large clock above the window chimed midnight. Clink, clink, chime.